I'm gonna see what we got. Yeah. Alright. So I'm gonna be checking the comments, I guess, throughout this, but I'll have something on screen. What should we start with? Yeah, I guess if y'all want me to cover something right now before we really get started, just put a chat in there, and I can go over it. $12 USC? Which one, the 411 or the 412? I can go over either one. You know what? You said 12 USC. I'll just go over them both. Alright, so there's kind of a lot of misconceptions about 12 USC 411, especially as it results. Oh, let me see what y'all said. Has the individual get an audit report on the securities tied to your estate? That can be done a couple different ways. First, you have to know what the securities are. The securities are bonds, and you can get bonds via securitizing, notes, applications, drafts, commercial paper, checks, bills of exchange, because checks are bills of exchange. Things like that, but you have to, it has to be collateralized, basically, and that was kind of what I went over in that last video, why securitization is illegal, because that's something that goes on and is quite prevalent even in a lot of the judicial systems where a lot of different parties have stuff that's been securitized court-wise. And something like, so basically, like, a lot of people are getting to 12 USC 411, and let's see, that is one way. It comes with a lot of studying. You got to get certain certifications, do things with the ABA, things like that. It's not the easiest process, and it takes quite a bit of studying. That's why you have people like, Brendan Jones and other people that are do like ISIN reports and things like, and CUSIP reports and things like that, because a CUSIP report will trace all of the fee tail interest. Now, something that most people aren't aware of is how trusts affect securities and the true nature of what securities actually are. Securities themselves are essentially just fee tail interest, because you have rights, you have titles, and you have actions or interests. Now, actions or interests to kind of to put together, and that was something referenced in Sesque v. Act. I believe it was the 1483. I got to go back and check. Don't quote me on that, but it is in one of the Sesque v. Acts where it states, rights, titles, and interests reserved for the king or something like that. So those are the main components of a trust. Now, a trust is defined, especially in like corpus juris secundum and other things, as the specific or a special type of right against the trustee that the beneficiary can enforce, and that right is granted by the settlor or grantor of the trust. And the right of disposition, or the right to dispose of property, is I'm gonna have to change my passcode after this, but yeah, it's something they're gonna have to check in. Hold on one second. They funded yeah. Do you need another key slip? It does help. There's a couple of ways to go about claiming it, right? You can either claim your estate under, equity, going after the head of the estate, like the principal, and handling it through the judicially, and administratively. And you can do that in combination with the securities, or you can handle it mainly with the securities, although you're going to have some, private trust and things like that actually owns the securities themselves, because, the Sesque v. Acts are in effect. So, but like what I was saying is, once they collateralize the they're issuing, lawful money. Code, they were saying that, a lot of people were going directly to the Federal Reserve and applying and taking a whole bunch of FRNs and being like, okay, I want to redeem these. Like, it's not quite how it works. Because the FRN is still a floating rate note, and it only is really equivalent exchange with another floating rate note, which is why you have so many applications. Now, when you get into applications, that's when it gets into 12 USC 412. And application for notes, collateral required. Any Federal Reserve Bank may take application to the local Federal Reserve agent for such amount of the Federal Reserve. Notes herein before provided for as it may require. Such application shall be accompanied with a tender to the local Federal Reserve agent of collateral in amount equal to the sum of the Federal Reserve notes thus applied for and issued pursuant to such application. The collateral security, so and another word for security is a surety. So if you've read Clerk's Praxis and you're aware of Admiralty Maritime Bonding and the Roman Catholic, or Roman canon practice of fide jusures, then it's a bond that the defendant had to provide to the court to ensure that the plaintiff making the claim against the defendant was able to recover the value of the damages and property and all that. The only issue with this entire Admiralty system is that the fact that it's being used against a lot of essentially debtors that have been put into a pretty rough spot, and they're now in a position where they're not really able to provide that bond, and they've got stringent requirements on what constitutes a bond and what constitutes a bailment and things like that. That's why a lot of people are getting involved, and suretyship is biblical. I mean, the Old Testament, Proverbs 6, goes into suretyship and how that stuff is applicable. So Congress in the Bible, there was a statute by the Congress in 1982 declaring 1983 the year of the Bible, and the Bible the Word of God. Those are their words, not mine. Although I don't disagree. The Old Testament are the true laws. They're what govern natural law and universal law. The New Testament is fake, but yeah. So that's kind of where, you know, a lot of people are going into it. The issue that we have right now is that the markets and the entire financial system is predicated upon the basically teetering on the edge. You know, the 2008 housing market and the, you know, the stocks and all the bonds, and that's essentially just all compiled together and given us the almost the hyperinflation that we're, you know, either about to see or seeing the beginning of. So that's really what it is there. So, you know, you can handle, you know, different things, mortgages, cases, using those ISIN reports in the U.S. and America, you know, their CUSIP reports. But yeah, like I said, that's just the fee tail interest. So the fee tail interest is just like the credit or the property interest. So you have the right, the titles, and the interest. The titles, you have two different titles. It's really one title and beneficial interest, but they've now kind of statutorily, under these black trusts, these LLCs and corporations, they've essentially turned what would have been beneficial interest into it is a blank endorsement. I mean, and blank endorsements, carte blanche endorsements are what causes that. So that's why you have to, you know, do things from a business perspective. You know, the business owns everything. You give up the rights to it, and then your business owns it. From there on, you're held to the business standard. So, you know, at that point, you can't commingle. You know, if your business owns it, your business owns it. If you own it, you own it, and you have all the liability. That's the difference. You can't go back and forth and saying, doing all that type of stuff. Like, that's where you get hemmed up. But yeah, so with the, you know, the legal title of ownership, you have fee simple, you know, certain other things. Sometimes there's leaseholds and other things like that. Although, if you've paid attention to a lot of the Marvel movies and WandaVision and you know, like the Scarlet Witch, Doctor Strange, things like that, they have a book called the Book of the Damned, and the Book of the Damned is a book of leasehold interests. Now, leasehold interests are usufruct, where the use of the fruits are being taken and the legal owner is left as a naked owner, essentially, with no rights to or enjoyment to the property, but all the burdens. And that's essentially what it is, you know, a trustee is. Except with a usufruct, like a pure usufruct, they have it's like almost no rights to compensation, even as a trustee. Whereas, you know, a trustee or fiduciary does have rights to compensation. So, and then that's the legal title. And then you have the beneficial title or the beneficial interest. You know, it's something Christian Walters really touched on, is it's not a beneficial title so much as interest. And that interest, you know, the securities and the credit, you know, the things like that, those are, you know, the fee tail. So, you know, you got the head and the tail, and, you know, when it talks about in scripture, and that's what it's talking about. The head or the capital makes all the decisions. So that the capital, you know, when they decapitated a city, they took its principal city or its capital. And that's what capitalism is. It's the sacking of the city financially. So the fee tail is just the interest. It's the ability to make a claim, but you don't own it. So that's what it is. When you combine all three and the trust terminates, you're left with fee simple absolute. Fee simple absolute is complete and absolute ownership with no one else being able to make a claim there too. Although if you have that level of power over the property, you have to hold it, you know, you have to check how the estate is being held. You have to, whether it's being held equitably or legally, and there's a whole myriad of other things that go into that. Are you able to hear me right now? I just want to make sure. I hope that everybody caught that. Shoot. Let me know if I'm still cutting in and out. I really don't know. So. Five by five wasn't really. It's good now. All right, just let me know because I really don't know. Yeah, if it's good, just put something in the chat so I know. I'll do my best to speak up, but I don't know if it's my phone or application or what. All right, cool. But yeah, it's really just rights, titles, and interests with trust. That's really what it is. Law and how these different, these ley lines or jurisdictions overlap. You're kind of just guessing at that point, really, or trying to work from one point of view. The problem is that you have to be able to navigate multiple different law forms at the same time and know where they apply, when they don't, and how they're being put together to form the whole mechanized device, the system that they've been using for the financial industry. But yeah, let me know. Got a couple other things I can cover. Got some just recording stuff. I see you, because like I said, I can go over whatever. But as far as if you want me to talk about Cesta KV, I can talk about that. We can go over estates. We can go over trust law. There's a few different things. And yes, the security is collateralized via the living signature. The signature is the reason I want the signature so bad is because that's the endorsement from the surety. Once they have the endorsement from the surety, it's essentially turned the note from paper to a mortgage-backed security or an asset-backed security, and then from there on out, it's seen as, because the body is considered portable land. Gold is considered portable land as well. So they look at a 30-year mortgage as, backed by gold. So that's what they... Oh, yeah. Do you utilize your interest? You can. That goes in more into the credit aspect of it, like credit and all that. Again, that's more of like credit and discharge and maintaining the credit score and entities and things like that. Business credit. That's utilization of the interests. That's why you have authorized users. The user is the beneficiary of the trust. But yeah, that's kind of something there. As far as the living trust is a method to establish basically just to prove that you're living. It rebuts the Cesta KV stuff kind of like right then and there, although to have it fully recognized, you do have to address it directly. So with the living trust, it's still needed though. So there's a couple of forms of trust that you need to kind of set up as far as your corporate structure, just as a bare minimum. The living trust is like the first layer. You know, a living trust, it's revocable, so it's not even recognized in all jurisdictions. That's why I said it's really just there to move property in and out of trust to show ownership of it. But the living trust itself has to be owned by, you know, a foreign trust that doesn't have any duty to file U.S. tax returns and, you know, set up offshore and, you know, stuff like that. If you're naturalized, you're gonna have to do the American national stuff, because you're gonna have to change and correct the status. Oh, do you endorse? Well, as far as endorsement, if you're talking about the 31 CFR 328.5 and .6 stamps, that's really what I was touching on as far as securitization being illegal, because I've done several different processes, and you know, and technically it should work in theory, but you know, the problem is that a lot of these, you know, financial companies and banks and other things like that, they're securitizing notes that they really don't have the rights to. So, you know, and they'll try to argue from here till the end that they got the rights to the notes, but I mean, if they're defrauding you know, consumers or natural persons, you know, the principal investors, you know, via suretyship and lack of full disclosure, I mean, how much can you say you really own the note or you own the application? I mean, the biggest problem with that is that most people aren't qualifying their endorsements. They're giving carte blanche endorsements, which are combined with the presumption of death, are presumed to grant, you know, an interest in the estate. And that goes back to, you know, the rule of signatures and the rule of forms and, you know, doing things like that. You do have to, yeah, it is a foreign grantor trust. Yeah, because the grantor has to be foreign to the United States. You know, like, you have to understand the difference between the Triple Crown, you know, John Henry Doe, John H. Doe, and John Doe. Those are, you know, John Henry Doe is an estate, John H. Doe is a transmitting utility, and John Doe is still technically an estate, but it's there to symbolize the administrator over the first, middle, last. Shows a flow chart of how we should structure ourselves. I don't right now. Not at the moment. That is something that I'll write down and I will cover on a later date. But as of right now, I don't have anything offhand to show that. I can talk about it though. Ideally, you do have, like, you know, the case text article was stating the corporate persona is the only one with the actual rights of ownership. However, LLCs and things like that, especially, they are a little bit naked as far as ownership. They're kind of a bit exposed. So, you know, like, the trust or the LLC really should be owned by a foreign trust, where you give up the ownership to the trust and the trust owns and manages it. Yeah, and this is all private banking stuff. I mean, that's really what it is. You know, there's a lot of people that were talking about it. Patrick Devine, you know, things like that. If you're offering this, how do you navigate it in the private? It seems you can't. One of the things is you have to have the title to your property, so you have to authenticate, you know, the certificates of live birth. And, you know, you got to change your status as well. So that's estate paperwork, trusts, you know, American national stuff, things like that. You can operate through trust. The corporate structure is how you do it. You know, if you take a look at any of these different multinational or international corporations and things like that, they have an entire corporate structure. They have, usually a foreign master trust. Hey, what's going on? What's going on, Jay? Yeah, so, yeah, like, you have that master trust, which doesn't actually handle any of the transactions. It just kind of sits there and, owns the other entities or trusts that own the entities. And it just kind of holds it, really. And then you have, like, you're operating it's still foreign trust, but it's going to be your trust that operates your business trust, for lack of a better word, the foreign express trust, and that owns and operates a lot of the the domestic entities. The domestic entities, like an LLC, domestic trusts, partnerships, things like that, where it has all the the foreign express trust owns all of those entities. It really covers ownership and operation. Now ownership and operation, they got to be separated so that the same way that they had they have holding companies and entities to shield against suits. So that is something you got to be aware of. And then that finally, the LLC, the all capital letter name, just like it states in the GPO style manual and 3.35 under religious terms, anything in capital letters is referring to something satanic. And this is straight out of the horse's mouth. So it's not like, it's far and wide. They literally put it in that manual. And most people, from Gene Keating to a bunch of other people, have been talking about that same manual. That they, it's been around forever. Yeah. They are. Delaware, now, people, yeah, Delaware is cool. If, the startup fees aren't as light, it's upwards of like $400 or $500 just to get the LLC up and going there. It's not, and then you need a registered agent, which is another service and things like that. That's how you do it properly. And then you once you set that up as the principal office for the the estate in Delaware, that gives you access to the chancery courts out in Delaware, which gives you access to equity, where most of the equity is actually moving within that state anyway. Wyoming is another place that does it like that. I don't know if they have chancery courts. Nevada is another place that's kind of got protections for corporate entities. But yeah, Delaware being the first state, and seeing as it's one of the original 13 British colonies, part of Britannia. What's going on? It's, especially since, there's so much equity that moves through Delaware. It's not a bad option. It's just, it does get a little pricey when you talk about expenses, because then you got to set up a foreign LLC in the state that you're operating out of and where you're currently at. In any other states, you got to do the same thing that you do business in. So it just kind of depends on what your needs are. Yeah. The all capital letter name is a broken mirror. It's what it does is it essentially, nothing living can ever be put in all caps. So, if you're saying that you're the all capital letter name, you're basically stating, you're binding yourself via your word to the, that corporate word or name. It's a symbol or a title, not so much a name. And you're binding yourself via your word, and that becomes a spell of binding, and it also becomes quantum entanglement, because now your word, you are what you say you are. That's part of the right of self-determination, but it's a double-edged sword, because life and death are in the power of the tongue, and those that love it eat the fruit thereof. So that's how they're getting people with the suretyship. because people are saying their name is spelled in all capital letters when nothing living can ever be spelled like that. It is criminal, and the courts uphold it. It is different. You can correct your name via a court-ordered name change. I've done it. They do recognize the difference between the first, middle, last, and a surname, comma, given names. For last, comma, first, middle, and they recognize the difference. I've got court cases to prove it. Although they got my personal information, that's why I've redacted so much of them. But on my videos, but yeah, no, it's definitely possible. Well, I've been through it. I've spoken to a lot of these different, these different bar attorneys, judges, lawyers, and especially like 5 years ago when COVID was really just started, popping out. Right before that, they were still moving, and then people that knew what was going on, they could still kind of challenge things like publicly in their realm, actually in person. That's really why they pushed that CV-19 so much, is because a lot of people were figuring that out. But yeah, I've had everybody, I've had like even sheriff's deputies, out in the county tell me that, I was like, look, I put a lien on the capital letter name with the upper and lower name as myself as the attorney, surname, comma, first name, and upper and lower, and they recognized it, so he was like, yeah, I mean, you're doing it right. And he's like, well, sounds like you need to file a police report. I was like, all right, well, so, he's like, most people, I was like, most people got them. He's like, some people call them demons, some call them ghosts, spirits. He's like, but if you're not dealing with it, I was like, well, then it's dealing with you, right? And he's like, yeah. I was like, okay, good to know. So they know about it. Authorized representative, yes. Now the importance to note is that the proper case name, which is capitis diminutio minima, is the representative for the decedent, which is the all capital letter name. Authorized representative, I believe it's under UCC, those different applicable provisions, they basically limit the liability because you're only representing the principal debtor, that capital letter name, and you're operating on behalf of it instead of being the thing. So you're acting on behalf of the mask instead of playing the character itself. Now, there's other roles that you want to make sure that you do. There's, stuff like the executor of the estate, executor and sole beneficiary. You can use those two titles at the same time. There are, let me see what else. Accommodation parties, sometimes applicable. Grantor beneficiary is something that, anytime you got the trustee, you got to be very, very careful, because most people are unaware how the Sesta KV, stuff is actually applicable in America. That's, Hamilton versus Eaton. So let me see if I can pull it up. So this is the fiduciary. The fiduciary is just a Latin name for the trustee. Fiduciary is recognized in tax law. That's why you have notice of fiduciary relationship 4156, which basically just notifies that there's a trust involved under, Latin terms, essentially. But yeah. So it states here, this is Hamilton versus Eaton, North Carolina, 1796, June 1st. It states here, A statute may be annulled by a treaty where there is an interference, the treaty being the last expression of the public will. Besides the Treaty of 1783, I apologize, where I'm recording is a little noisy. It says, besides the Treaty of 1783 was declared by an act of assembly of this state passed in 1787 to be law in this state, and this state, by adopting the Constitution of the United States in 1789, declared the treaty to be the supreme law of the land. So, then you start getting into, okay, well, what does the Treaty of Paris say? I spelled it. So, Treaty of Paris, let's just pull up National Archives. So, Treaty of Paris, right here. Let's just pull directly from the website. So, Article 5. It is agreed that Congress shall earnestly recommend it to the legislatures of the respective states to provide for the restitution of all estates, rights, and properties which have been confiscated belonging to real British subjects. So, why is that applicable? You have Hamilton v. Eaton. You got the British royalty, the British Israelites here in America, under Roman Britannia. Colchester, Connecticut. You have New York, England, New York City. You have Londinium, Augusta, Georgia. And then also of the estates, rights, and properties of persons resident in districts in the possession of His Majesty's arms. Does that sound like District of Columbia? And who have not borne arms against the said United States, and that persons of any other description shall have free liberty to go to any part or parts of any of the 13 United States, and therein to remain 12 months unmolested in their endeavors to obtain the restitution of such of their estates, rights, and properties as may have been confiscated, and that Congress shall earnestly recommend to the several states a reconsideration and revision of all acts or laws regarding the premises, so as to render the said laws or acts perfectly consistent, not only with justice and equity, but with the spirit of conciliation, which on the return of the blessings of peace should universally prevail. And that Congress shall also earnestly recommend to the several states that the estates, rights, and properties of such last mentioned persons shall be restored to them, they refunding to any persons who may now be in possession the bona fide price, where any has been given, which such persons may have paid on purchasing any of the said lands, rights, or properties since the confiscation. Now, it's very important to note that this basically, trusts are seen. It's never been legal in that specific sense, because trusts are more under the jurisdiction of the Court of Conscience, the Chancellor's Court. And it's important to note that the legislatures of each of the 13 colonies, they have to essentially reimburse bona fide purchasers for value of the properties. So there's no excuse as far as restitution of estates. I mean, it's right here. This is the law of the land. Whether people realize it or not, it's a whole different story. But there's already been case law to support it. And then, you have other cases like Hart versus Burnett, which was a California case that went into basically how dealing with the land titles of specific municipalities and how, they were basically binding, I think, certain pueblos in Mexico, dealing, at that time, Mexico dealing with the United States. Yeah. Now, dealing with places outside of America, in UK jurisdictions specifically, it's really, there's always going to be a chain of title. So, and it's most of the time it's going to be statutory or treaty. Canada, they've got Canadian constitutions there, which again, it's still SKV statutes because they supersede that in time. and that's kind of something that's able to be used almost here in America. It essentially covered most of the world. That's why you have, like, there's different anime that talk about it, Code Geass and things, Lelouch or the Rebellion, or whatever that thing's called. But that's funny. It's 17, shows me 12 over here. I can't see. That's wild. But yeah, let me know what y'all want me to go over. Give me some ideas, or if y'all just want me to, y'all got some other specifics of anything. Yeah, I really just want to make sure the information gets to the right people. If it ain't too many, I'm not too worried. So yeah, that's something that can be done. As far as like response to the SKV, I did, the part 3 where I went through every single act and how it formed. This is something. First step is really, let me see, things like this. So this is the notice of forgiveness. This is the notice of appointment. These are recorded with the Register of Deeds. Colob and birth certificate. Birth certificate is the proof of the legal person. The certificate of live birth is the proof of the surety. The surety that's living for the estate on the certificate of live birth. That's the more medical form. So you have the birth certificate is one step removed, and the certificate of live birth is essentially, I think, the closest title to the original. The original being the application, I believe, or there may be a separate document. It's kind of a gray area once you get into it, because they hold a lot of that under trade secrets and they sell the things off to the Vatican. But yeah, these documents are something that you do at first. You got it. There's a fee schedule. There's 2 different fee schedules. Reload. There it goes. So you do that. And it's got amounts. The formatting is a little off because it's not what I usually put the document in, but this is, these are the first basic steps, just to be able to, essentially just to get you started. And especially the older UK statutes, once you understand that they are applicable here, you're dealing with, again, what rights, titles, and interests, like Christian Walters was saying. And you have to basically reserve the interest. Now, a reserve is a trust. That's why Indian reservations are all trusts, lands. They're held in trust. So especially when you reserve all rights, titles, and actions or interests, you're reserving all of the titles of ownership for the property itself. And all those titles are held in trust at that point. People have said that it's the date that the estate was funded, for sure. Because that's the date that, the Mortman account was essentially started. They finalized those things dealing with Puerto Rico and other things like that, but is using letters of credit to say 5 UCC 5-108 regarding the Ruby issue is superseded. using indentured trustee. Now, to be honest, UCC is law merchant. I prefer to use exclusive equity. That's what I started with. That's what I studied, because trust law is ultimately the highest law form. The biggest UCC code that I really use is 1-308, just to reserve the rights, because all rights reserved is reserving the interest, the fee tail interest, and then without prejudice is basically stating that adverse actions taken against by other parties cannot do prejudicial actions, which is what prejudice is. It's essentially personal status or presumption of law. So it's not true law, it's just presumptions, court presumptions. I prefer just to use, like I said, maxims of law, equity, trust law, estate law, because in their system, the highest title is executor. That's, you go in as trustee. I've gotten burned like that, believe me. I not knowing how everything was going, yeah. It was my, one of my first times, but, I'm not, you learn. Yeah, exclusive equity is honestly, equity is the most highest law, because statutes are, because you have what's referred to as the letter of the law and the spirit of the law. The spirit of the law is the intent. The letter of the law is what it literally says, and the way it's defined as it applies. Now, the original, like, British common law and Admiralty maritime law, which is civil, and things like that, they're very rigid. They're extremely rigid, and that's why because of the whole disparity of the timelines and the narratives as far as world history, like, they're not telling people like how it goes, but that's why Chancery came about, is because the King's Chancellor, essentially, that's why it's called Chancery. It formed what was, that court and that jurisdiction, because there were so many rigid Admiralty maritime statutes dealing with vessels. And again, nothing's really changed. They extended the timeline and make people think all of this happened so long ago. Patrick Devine has his own thing. Banking is a lot of it Admiralty maritime. If you understand it and you go about it, that's cool. But I'm not for bailments. And Patrick talked a lot about bailments, and that's why I just couldn't get quite all the way there. He's got a lot of good stuff, don't get me wrong. He knows what he's talking about. It's just the way he approached it. I find that equity is a lot easier for me to deal with, especially with what I know about the scripture and the Old Testament, and then how, the Catholic Church fabricated, an entire testament. It makes it a lot easier, honestly, because, Congress in the Bible, that's already been acknowledged by Congress. You've got, equity, which has been long upheld as a jurisprudence. You got, trust law, which is, when you really think about it, you have creator endowed rights, especially when you reference the Declaration of Independence. So, all men, man being the comprisal term of men and women, just not to discriminate. That's why I reference that. But, the status of man is really, it's higher than a human. I mean, nowhere in the scriptures does it say human, as far as I know, and I've read a decent amount of them. Nowhere I've seen says human. It all says man or son of man, and when you go back to the Hebrew, it's all Adam. It's all Adam. It's never, I've never seen human in the scripture. So human is a law comprisal to turn people into animals legally. As far as authentication of the birth certificate in a non-Hague country, you do it at your state level first, and then you take the same document and do the same thing. Office of Authentication, Sterling, Virginia. at the federal level. You get it done. I'll be honest, last couple of years, they've been taking year plus to get back to people. And that's really why I looked into it, because the totem pole above the public servants. Yeah. You take a higher office, because there's executor is the highest office, just like David Clarence was saying, David Clarence Scroll. Then below that, you have the office of administrator, which is the judge, what the judges take as executors based on tort at their own risk, meaning they don't have the official title of executor, but they're the administrator on the account. And below that, you have trustee. The reason why the trustee is even lower than the executor in the first place is because the executor controls the assets of the estate, and the trust was funded with assets of the estate. The estate is the grantor. So that's why the trustee has to answer to the executor, and that's why it's the highest office still in the public. Really in the private too, because when you think about it, what are we supposed to be doing? We're supposed to be executing equity, pleading for the widow, judging the fatherless, judging the poor and the needy. That's what we're supposed to be doing anyway. What reference books do you study with, and are you going if you were going exclusively? I used a couple things. One was Corpus Juris Secundum. Now, Corpus Juris Secundum, especially book 90 on trusts, helped tremendously, because Corpus Juris Secundum is like the legal encyclopedia that kind of talks about all of the jurisprudence for the particular subject the Corpus Juris book is on. Let me find one. Where's book 1? Or subsection 1. Where'd it go? 175. Where is it? Yeah. Let's see. Patrick Devine put it up there. You have a copy of this as well? I do. It's in my drive, the To Be Fruitful Training Group drive, the private library. That's where I have it. Honestly, if it, a lot of these things, they're pretty large files, and I'm not able to send them to people directly like that. It takes too long, and it's a lot. That's kind of why I just asked for donations on that. Let me see. Let me pull it up from another way. Corpus jurisdiction. There we go. This is book 1. Oh. Do I not have section 1 in here? No, I put it up here. I'll just go over the table of contents. And so this is like everything that book 90 has. Like, it's got, this literally goes down to with sometimes 50 different. This talks about all the intricacies of a lot of what if scenarios, and and this is with well settled case law. So every court action is a trust. All these cases, all these causes, they're all trusts. So, you've even got Taunton trusts, which are payable on death accounts. Joint ownership with a trust. It's got parole evidence, which is oral evidence. Presumptions and burdens of proof, validity, revocation, resulting trust. It goes into the types of trust, express, implied, constructive, resulting. This is a pretty heavy resource. The other resource that I would suggest is, and there's so much in here that I literally would not be able to even barely touch on it. Like, you could be sitting there for hours reading that, to totally honest. And yeah, every trust matter is in equity. They're all equitable matters. So that's why a lot of these civil jurisdictions don't want to recognize foreign trusts and things like that, because when you realize that, government is a trust or government is a corporation, you start to look at the world a little differently. Self-governance takes us on a whole new meaning. Yeah, you can't. That's the other issue too. Let's say you're in a civil court and you allege that there's a trust, you have to move that into in camera. You can't continue to put that in the public, because everything in the public side of the court gets published, and you essentially breach the trust if you continue to talk about it in the public. That's why a lot of these people get psyche evals and things like that, because they're breaching their own trust. So they're looking at them like, are you incompetent? You're literally breaching your own trust. So yeah, and then the other resource I'd use to study trust law is Gilbert's Law Summaries on the Law of Trust. Now this is by Edward C. Halbach Jr. And as soon as it loads, while I'm waiting on that, I'm just gonna see. Yeah, trust is how everything's operating, because there's no contracts right now, like, at all. With the ongoing bankruptcy, HJR 192, Public Law 73-10, and Nixon's suspension of the dollar from the gold standard in 71 for foreign, creditors, there's essentially no way. It's a fiat currency, and it's been that way for almost 50 years. It's why things are happening the way they are. When you consider that, and there's no valuable consideration, because if you really want to say, well, because that's what it was called, and a unilateral executory promise, that's essentially what these notes and applications are. And if you want to say that, oh, that's valuable consideration, it is not. So, and then they try to say, oh, well, he gave us this note, he pledged this note, he's the executor of his estate, he's the trustee on this for the Social Security Administration on this account. He gave us this collateral. It was just a gift. I mean, if you really want to say that, and then they use suretyship to enforce that against the principal investor, it just doesn't work. But that's what they're doing. Doesn't make it right, doesn't make it equitable, but the problem comes in with enforcement and recognition and cognizance of the matter. And that's why everything has to be done in equity, and you have to do everything with, overcoming the burden of proof. Implied trust nothing has been expressed. Yes, when they say implied trust, that's under a moral obligation. Now, moral obligations are not held up in legal statutes, because legal is very rigid according to the letter of the law, and does not care at all about the spirit of the law or the intent. Thank you. So, yeah, I mean, it's all trust relationships, and until you let's just say that, if you make a general deposit and you sign something and it grants title to the bank, what that actually creates is a bailment relationship. It does not actually create, that's a debtor-creditor relationship. It does not form a trust. Like, you can come back and you can claim, like Christian Walters was saying, you can come back and claim that you made a mistake, and you can express the trust using, correspondence and reestablishing certain things, and but to be honest, at that time, like, the note is already lost. They're going to sell the note regardless, but you're in a better standing if you've already expressed everything as a trust, because, like I said, there's no valuable consideration. There's no mutuality of obligation, because in a trust, there's different parties and there are differences in the obligations. And it gets easier, just don't assume you know anything. Just be like a child and keep just go to the dictionary, the law dictionary, and pretty much read every word. It's a whole other language. Black's Law, Anderson's Law, Bouvier's, Ballantyne's, things like that. USC definitions, that's where it gets really wild, because a lot of the definitions apply in very specific manners, and a lot of them are not universally applied. So you'll get a lot of time. That's why I don't like legalities, because legalities are the undoing of equity or natural law, under the Most High. So you're really just playing by their rules in their courts with their game. So you're nothing but if you're a basketball player, you're playing on their basketball courts. If you're a football player, you're playing football on their football, turf. Like, it just gets, it gets really messy. Honestly, you can have, here's the thing though. You can have the most bulletproof trust in the world, but if you don't know how to operate it as a private trustee in the private, and grantor beneficiary in the public, you'll breach your own trust. So it makes things a lot more difficult, because you have to know what you're doing in both realms. That's why you're the executor of the estate in the public, and in the private, you are the private trustee of that particular trust. And you control the terms, for the estate, as you're the executor of the estate. And then you dictate the terms XYZ, under what law form the trust is set up under what locus or situs of the assets the trust has, where the principal addresses are, where the mailing addresses are, how it's represented, how it's administered with the tax laws, things like that. Yeah, it really is. Alright, GTR, I get it. Apologize on the noise. What if they don't let you in private and camera meeting with the Trust Express? That's been the issue I've had for a long time, which is why I've had to go about it the way I've gone about it. There's certain elements that need to be expressed in the public via the public record, paper, clerk of court, deeds office, etc. And then there's certain things, yes, it can be very deadly. Honestly, that's one of the biggest reasons why you have all these lawyers and bar attorneys going and saying, oh, you got these sovereign citizens, because they're going and commingling and breaching the trust. And that's why they get the moniker sovereign citizen. Of course, with just disclaimer, with this To Be Fruitful training group, we don't endorse any of that. We don't have anything to do with sovereign citizen movements. We're not associated with that in any way, shape, or form. But yeah, in camera is supposed to be where equity actually is. The problem I've seen with just getting it in camera in the first place is getting them to really recognize it. Now, one of the ways that I've had some limited success with is sealing the court record. If you seal the court record and allege that there are trade secrets or confidential commercial information, or certain things like that, you're able to do it. But the way you do it, you have to have like a validly and properly set up trust to create, well, not just create, but to actually have a valid reason privately, like a private cause of action, as well as the public side. So that's why it gets into that type of thing. Yeah, but that's you don't necessarily need to take a vow of silence. Just don't speak if you don't know what you're doing or don't understand what you're talking about. Like, unless you've studied, like, don't assume, because like, unless you've literally looked up word for word and you've got witnesses or authorities backing up what you say, just don't assert it in camera or in the public or in court. You got to be able to everything you say has to be proven. So you got to essentially talk from a research paper point of view. Yeah, that's why I like Christian Walters, because he was the one that talked about everything. Christian Walters was a good resource. Tammy Pepperman, she was a little bit more on the, I would say, aggressive side of it, but she was still right on a lot of things. A good number of things. And there's a few other people that talked about it, but not to the same way Christian Walters did. Christian Walters broke it down. Yeah, and that's just the securitization. That's why it's illegal, because you have the same funds being repackaged over and over and over when it's really and literally the same pool of assets. So in doing so, you just hypothecated the same asset over and over and over and increased the national debt. They don't care, because they all they want is capital gains, but that's what they're doing. So this is the other resource that I learned. So it goes over, this is like a more lame. Corpus Juris Secundum is super, super detailed, and it's still it doesn't speak necessarily in like so crazy that you can't understand it, but it is written more towards like a more learned eye point of view. So especially like I would suggest like reading Gilbert's Law summaries first, and then reading Corpus Juris Secundum while you do it. I mean, honestly, hypothecation is legal. Again, what we're really doing is delineating the difference between law and at-law statutes and equitable forms and procedures. That's really the difference. Like, it's legal in all these different jurisdictions. Like, it's legal all over the world. That's why they have global exchanges. There's Chicago Board of Trade, NYSE, Nikkei market, London exchange, etc. But it doesn't make it right. I mean, just because it's de facto or it's commonly in practice, it doesn't make it equitable or right. And that's really what you're alleging in equity, that all of these things are really unconscionable, because had you known that, you wouldn't have gotten into the arrangement in the first place. Or if there was another way to do it that you knew about, you wouldn't do it. So it gets into that. But the reason why I like Gilbert's Law so much is because it goes over, talks about agentship. It differs from, debtor-creditor relationships. It's the different parts of a trust. You have the parties to a trust: settlor, trustee, nature of trustee's interest, beneficiaries. This is the rights, titles, and interest, ABC. You have your trust purposes. You have methods of creation. You have inter vivos, or living trusts. You have testamentary trusts via wills. Transfer of interest, alienation, spendthrift trusts. This goes into, what's a public charitable trust. It goes into those. Somewhere in here, it's been a minute since I've gone through here specifically, but somewhere in here, you have specific parties: grantor, beneficiary, trustee, etc. You have the specific res, or the thing held in trust. You have the intent for the trust. What was the grantor or settlor's intent? What was the purpose for the trust? Was it to provide, a means of living for somebody with quite a number of debts that, they couldn't own all the assets to where, creditors would jump all over them, but they needed a way to sustenance in the meantime, so you could set up a spendthrift trust. That's what a spendthrift trust is, kind of like the Declaration of Independence. Was it just for the purposes of passing just the title to a property? Was it for the purposes of, preserving assets? Was it, it just depends on what that, so you've got intent, purpose, parties, specific res. You have to have a thing to hold in trust, whether it be a piece of paper, a pen, regardless of value. And then you have one of the methods of formation. You have like contract, transfer, appointment, assignment, And shoot, I should know this. There's like one other method. But yeah, that's how trusts are formed. Securitization audit is only showing you what they legally are able to do with their financial life. Yeah, like I said, they're operating out of the black trust. The black trust is the statutes and codes. The white trust is the private, more like what Lewin, that treatise on the law, like the law or the trusts. By, I forgot what his name is. It was by Lewin. It doesn't make it right, but that is what they're doing legally. So at law is all debtor, creditor, and equity brings them in trust law. Yeah, because when you start winding up the trusts and you start operating under older law forms, you have to know trust law. You can't breach the trust, because at that point they set up all of these legal persons as public trusts to be able to operate under these current black trust law forms. So if you don't have an entity or an interface into that portal jurisdiction, you gotta have something. Otherwise, you don't have anything. Does the D of I serve as a witness? It's an acknowledgement. It's really an acknowledgement. Because the Creator endowed inalienable rights were already endowed by the Most High, endowed by the Creator. But all the Declaration of Independence did, it really just acknowledged what was already there. And that's what they used to protect themselves while they went and enslaved all of the other Indians here in America. So we trusted them. That was also our intent. Yeah, it was done by fraudulent means, but no party in a trust needs to know that one's being formed for there to be a valid trust. So again, they're using some real law forms and very mischievous and evil ways to hold your own stuff against you as collateral. That's why I keep talking about the broken mirror stuff so much, because the capital letter name or the corpse, the estate owns everything, and the estate was only formed as by reason of the presumption of death in the first place. Which when you get rid of the presumption of death, you don't necessarily have a legal person. The only thing that you have left is a natural person, the estate or the trust. And then when you prove life in the courts and legally, it's a whole different status, because then you got to operate under the real stuff. You're no longer under this play around and operating the way they do. You got to do everything the right way, regardless of what they do. Yeah. Land patent necessary for reversion. Here's the deal about land patents. Land patents are reserved, in speaking with specifically North America, like in regards to its relation to the United States as a corporation, 28 U.S.C. 3002, 15 A, B, and C, Clearfield Trust Code versus United States. Like, the land patent, it's more for like real land, like actual parcels of land, because the thing about a land patent is when you go, the BLM and the Bureau of Land Management, it can only be granted to an individual, and that's something that has to be claimed using a kind of a mix of like genealogical and trust law, showing the rights of heirship and testacy. It's kind of a gray area. That's more of a genealogical side that the so-called black African American, copper-colored peoples of America can allege, and that's something more specific. The second, and that's considered fee simple absolute. That's an absolute conveyance of land. Now, when short of that, you have equitable title. And the best thing on that is equitable title via a foreign trust. Mind you, the purchaser, the trustee or the authorized representative on behalf of the trust has to actually have the capacity to own the property and alienate it to the trust and quit claim it to the trust, or sell it to the trust, however it's done, to effectuate the transfer. But you got to have, that's when personal status becomes an issue. So you have to correct the personal status, and then you got to lawfully and properly transfer it over to the trust, and then the trust owns it. Yeah, you do have to have your own trust to play in their sandpit. Although, in dealing with things, they only recognize what they recognize. They only can see their own image, because anything else, they're blind. So, to be recognized in their courts, you got to set up the LLC. Or corporation if you're that, but really LLC, because it indemnifies you, the living man, as the administrator over the fiction. Do you reference deity in the indenture? Now, due to my spiritual beliefs, my trusts are all set up under the Most High's laws, and they're validly upheld via the different acknowledgments via Congress, the Hague Conventions, etc. I know how to enforce scripture in the courts using the different acknowledgments and things like that. That's why I trust in the Most High, and I've set my trusts up under the Most High, because that's how I did everything. That's what I believe in. The safest place is in the Most High's hands. There's no other place that you really can hide. Really, everybody's got to answer to someone. I answer to the Most High. No need for the estate trust then. If you're talking about the living estate trust, I feel like that was a loophole. Again, it goes into foreign express trusts, and then completely private trusts are a method to hold the estate, and they would technically be considered estate trusts. But the trust itself, the trust corpus, is considered an equitable estate. So that's when it becomes, how are you holding your estate? Are you holding your estate legally, or are you holding your estate equitably? See, that's the thing. You gotta, if you're speaking about the legal persons, yes. But ultimately, what is the self? The self is, if man was made in the image of the Most High, the man is an image himself. So when you talk about the higher self, you're really talking about the Most High. Because when you talk about, the subconscious collective mind, and then the egoic mind, the illusion of individuality, I mean, it's still an account. Don't get me wrong. It's an accounting of all your deeds, the present self. But yeah, it's you have to basically trust in the Most High, because there's just no other way. Common law. Yeah, common law is good. I mean, common law at least gets you back to something, to an extent, outside of Admiralty Maritime, unless you go into the civil venue again, and then you're dealing with the three different jurisdictions: land, air, and sea. You have the law of the land, dealing with the states. You have the law of the sea, dealing with commerce, and you have the law of the air, dealing with future interest or testacy and airship. That's what the three jurisdictions are there. Those are the three keys. Why you see UBS and other banks, have three keys or three crowns in their logos, certain bar associations, certain logos and coats of arms. Yeah. Common law needs a victim. Yeah, it does. It really does. So yeah, and I'm just, yeah, you always want equity, because if you don't go into equity, you're playing by their rules, and it gets ugly. I've tried it, believe me. By their rules, or you play games by their rules, they take it as jurisdiction. So I don't recommend it. What is something else that I could go over? Their symbology will show you. Yeah, and that's a whole other language. Symbology is a language that goes beyond words. That's how a lot of the Knights Service, Knights Malta, Knights Templar, Knights Hospitaller, that's how they preserve knowledge the way that they have. That's why you have certain people, like organizations that have clear chain of title and knowledge and stuff. That's why you have all those different things. As far as, let me see, do I have any case law that I can go over? Let me see. Those are some things. Insurance. Anyone know much about this LMI? Common law. Common law is very harsh. That's why it's like. That's why it's. I like the way that like Carlton Weiss sets up his trust under the common law, but again, you're using certain means like contract and sale to effectuate transfers, like as far as trusts. But then once the arrangement has already been made, then it really falls under equity because that's the only way to enforce it. So that's why I like, Carlton Weiss Concise Trustee Handbook. That's something that I've used in the past. And then you got other different living trust books that they're not hard. Living trusts are not hard. But they, once you get into using those, it becomes a little different. Because they're not, again, like I said, they're not always recognized, especially if it's revocable by the trustee. That's what a lot of states don't recognize. It depends on what type of judgment you're going after against somebody and whether or not you actually have an equitable claim against them. That's kind of a open-ended question right there. Does the process present itself as the knowledge falls itself into place? It does, but it takes so long. And to be honest with you, the way things are going, them changing the currencies January 1st, there's not a lot of time. There really just isn't. It's different. Let me see. Yeah, honestly, that's how I found out quite a bit of this stuff, is because, I went through talking to like every official in the courts and figuring out and like only having limited knowledge, and they're looking at me like, how much do you know? And I'm looking at them like, are they the gatekeeper? So, it takes a long time trying to figure that out. That's why I've been doing this for 5 years. Had I known everything I know from the start, I'd be done by now. But I wouldn't know how to move like I know how to move now, because I haven't been through it, or I wouldn't have been through it. So, yeah. In arrears, the LMI. What do you mean by LMI? Is that something specific to Australia? I'm not really sure on LMI. Let me see if we got any treaties. Who paid for the lender's mortgage insurance? Okay. Yet don't get the benefit of the policy. So that's more of like a mortgage issue. Okay. Yeah, when you get into that, I believe that goes into the title insurance and things like that, and basically insuring and bonding the transfer of the title to the property. That goes into like the back end insurance policies and things like that. And again, mortgage is just mort gauge. It's a measure. A gauge is, pledge or a measure, and mort is death. So you have a specific measure of death. So how much death or debt do you want to take on? That's what a mortgage is. So, again, the presumption of death is what allows that in the first place, because the only reason that people don't have access to their trusts is because of the presumption of death in the first place. Let me see. Can you speak more about currency change? Well, I can see what I talk about over here. I had seen an article, I want to say about a month or two ago, that stated that banks are already going to go into a test phase of the CBDC, digital dollar. And once that happens, there's other implications as far as, the jab, things like that. Digital IDs as far as access to internet, quantum financial system, things, etc. There's a long list of things there. That's why they're already looking to move and do certain things this year. But the difference is how far your claim goes. I've done certain things in the STKV that I've proven my claim to an extent, which, I've got things on the public record and things like that as far as deeds. Like, there's a point where you can get to where it's too much, but a lot of this stuff people already know. It's already in the public. Ultimately, what is the point? To discharge our current debt and then pay the national debt, continue to pay our bills with the trust. Now, see, here's the thing. When you really get in, like, the assets held in trust, the real assets held in trust is like, pre-1933, like, assets. So before 1933, everything was backed by gold and silver. Now, why, I don't know whether or not you would be able to get, like, actual bullion. I'm not gonna go that far. But as far as a means of exchange that's as good as that, whether it be credit default swaps, accounts, etc., the entire point of Social Security was to provide for everything. I mean, every time you get paid, you get paid out of the Mortmain accounts. That's why they set them up in the first place, because if they didn't, they wouldn't have a means of generating funds. So they already have the funds created. That's why they have, the SSA with the actuarial tables, and, they calculate the value at birth and borrow against that 9 times over and increase the national debt. Discharging the debt and the credit side is literally just the fee tail interest. It's not the principal held in trust. The principal deposits held in reversion under the STKV Acts are way more than what people think they are. I'm not really sure if I'm at liberty to say the exact number, but Tammy Pepperman, she stated how much the estate goes for on an open market, and it's quite enough to where you never have to worry about money ever again. But mind you, if you're going to stay in the system, it's going to get a whole lot worse. It's going to start looking like Ghost in the Shell or Terminator or Matrix before long. We're already seeing parts of that. So this is why self-governance is important, because you're already being disenfranchised. So why would you want to fight for the same franchise? Also, after 19 years, no payments made intentionally, is there an IRS form that can be used to obtain those funds? Now, when you're talking about settling the entire STKV account, you're dealing with trust entirely. Trusts formed by reason of presumptions of death. That's the only way to terminate the entire thing. Because there are certain ways to go about it with the IRS, being that the IRS is owned by the UK and the British Crown. But you gotta know how trust operates first. You gotta know how trust mergers occur, especially with assets that adhere to the documents, whether they be seals or stamps, and etc. You gotta know how the value is then applied. Yeah, there's a form for everything. There really is. To an extent. Once you start getting with like exclusive equity, you got to start drafting up stuff yourself. But yeah, and that's really there's certain things that you can use, but you got to basically audit the entire account, go over, request the records. There's certain acts that you can use, FOIA, Privacy Act, etc. Do your due diligence, look into that. Those are methods that you can obtain those records. Yeah. Well, yeah, it is a redemption. It's, but the thing is, you got to do things prior to that too. It's not just all going to happen all at once. They set up a whole process. So, I've done my best to, tell people like it is, according to the law, the actual law, not just play statutes and playing around in, legal limbo. No, that's why I talk about the real stuff. Comptroller? What you mean by comptroller? You guys over there need a tax advocate? Yeah, to an extent. The only issue is, again, it's like a lot of these tax, CPAs and other things, you got some that know about it, but most of them aren't going to know about the SSKV accounts. Most of them aren't going to know about estate ownership and how to properly execute the trust. Most of them aren't going to know how to express the trust, things like that. I mean, it's yeah. Oh, like going to the comptroller for an accounting. The only issue is that the state holds a lot of the authority because they created the presumption of death, but the IRS, and other entities, you got other securities agencies that they handle a lot of the control as far as the interest in the securities. And I mean, the IRS has an accounting record of it, so that's more of an IRS type thing. Well, that's the entire point of settling the account. Yeah. You have to talk about the real stuff. If you don't talk about the real stuff, what's the point? You sitting there lying to people and they're going to get them nowhere, and then they're going to run to you, ultimately your word is your bond. And that's ultimately what it is. That's why you got to back everything you say up with something, some credible sources, because if your word is being used in it, while you tell the truth, it better be backed by something. So, yeah, honestly, and because when you get into closing it out, that's when it starts talking about settlement, closure, and termination of accounts. Because, especially with book entry, and book double entry bookkeeping and things like that, and GAAP, like generally accepted accounting principles and modern money mechanics and things like that, you have to really pay attention to like the negative and positive, and make sure everything zeroing out accounts to balance the books. You have a matching amount of debts and assets to pay off the national debt. And and then so that's settlement. Closure is just when the account goes from being public to private, and then new entries on the account either get put in a new account or the status of the account gets changed. And then termination is the closure of the entire account. It's no longer just a closed account where there's entries and debits still made. No, like a termination, the account is gone. Taxman always gets his fruit. Yeah, that's why it's a usufruct. Let them do forensic auditing as they have the power to do this. The tax and ab should... Honestly, the IRS is honestly your best friend doing this. Because, the IRS has all the records. They know who took from the estate. They know who filed the returns to obtain the return checks. They know who filed all that stuff. They have records. Like, they have what's called an individual master file, which is a record of every single dime and penny you've ever spent. And they got the business master file, which is a record of every dime and penny that a business has ever spent. So, I don't know why people keep freaking out over, they already track everything. They've been tracking everything that you've spent over the last years and years and years. That's what happens in a bankruptcy. They have to account for it. So, yeah. The ex removed equity from the family home, cashed out in 401k, and the judge ordered the judgment on behalf of the other spouse. I'm sorry to hear that. I don't know the specifics on the case. I can't really. Yeah, that sounds like a pretty tough spot. Honestly, like, yeah, you know, and this is not, again, not legal advice, not financial advice or anything, but with what you presented there, the executive, like, you know, reclaiming the office of executor seems like one of the first steps. There could be more depending on what, you know, the situation itself. But it definitely looks like, you know, the executor was acting as an administrator de tort and going without lawful authority and doing a bunch of stuff, you know, through the court. That's more of like an equitable claim than anything, because it already happened legally. It seems like, just seeming like from what you told, you know, presented. But yeah, there's a lot of due diligence required in that. Creative accounting, yeah, that's exactly what it is. They got real creative because they got real broke. Reversion is for any country that has birth certificate system member of UN. Yeah. If you look under Roman canons, and you know, they're a little bit harder to find. I do have them in the drive, like as far like a decent portion of them that relate to it. You know, in the private library, you know. But yeah, honestly, like, reversion applies anywhere where there's a birth certificate. The certificates of live birth are, under Roman canon law, considered settlement certificates, and that goes back to they were held by members of a parish of, you know, one of the Catholic parishes, and you know, you have the word spells, you know, you're a member of a parish, you're perishing, you know, a congregation of the dead. So, you know, alive, there's no distinction between C-section, natural birth, and induced abortion under 1 USC 8. So alive, especially when in relation to the Homo sapien, you know, which is a hominin, which is under the order of primates, being an animal, yeah, it's the same thing. It's the same system that's been set up. There's different applications, different procedures, different processes, but it's the same thing that was set up, just in different ways. Chancellor can only redress that executor matter. Yeah, that's why a lot of people go for incorporating into Delaware, because it gives them access to the chancery courts. Mind you, that's not, you know, everywhere, and I believe, you know, but yeah, that's why you start getting into certain things like the SKV Acts and the bishops, and then, you know, beyond that, there are still statutory remedies depending on the jurisdiction, like, you know, presumption of death suits, things like that, for wrongful presumption of deaths. Yeah, do we repudiate our position as heir every time we get a license or file 1040, kind of like a catch-22? Now, things like 1040, 1041, returns, U.S. returns, things like that, that really goes into what is your standing and, like, what is the liability on the account. Because that's when it becomes like a more of like, okay, you know, you're signing by authorized representative or executor, you know, things like that. And that's more of like that kind of scenario. It is kind of a catch-22. That's why you're supposed to move everything from the 1040 to the 1041 and move all the assets over to the estate, and then move the legal estate over and into an equitable one. But yeah, birth certificate includes stillbirth. Everything before includes is excluded. Yeah, that's what it is. They treat, you know, the birth certificate's a founding report. It's a certificate of death, you know. And the probate courts, I've gone and done it. They acknowledge it's a death certificate. They know. Yeah, you know, that's something, you know, very, very real there. So, yeah, let me see what else we can go over. Do I got anything off the top of my head? We can talk about this. So this is DC code. If a person leaves his domicile without a known intention of changing it and does not return or is not heard from for 7 years from the time of his leaving, he shall be presumed to be dead in any case where his death is in question, unless proof is made that he was alive during that time. And next code. If the person presumed to be dead, pursuant to section 14-701, is found to be living, a person injured by the presumption shall be restored to the rights of which he was deprived by reason of the presumption. So, you know, that's applicable. You got Clearfield Trust Company. Clearfield Trust Company. And it states here, this is the actual case, just in case you were curious. It was decided March 1st, 19. It states here, where is it? The United States does business on business terms. Employees, quote, by the largeness of its dealings and its having to employ agents to do what if done by a principal in person would leave no room for doubt, end quote. Especially in business. Maine and New York birth definitions acknowledge that each product of a birth is a human person, baby, and placenta. Exactly. So the placenta and the afterbirth that a lot of these hospitals take is, you know, that's something that, yeah, they're going and taking, and they're not supposed to be doing that. But they're creating the presumption of death by getting those things and saying, oh, we have a missing. And we have the power to rebut those. So this is powers and corporate governance. That's why, you know, there's certain things going on with the WEF and stuff like that. Let's see, Roman canons. I think it's this document. Let me see, time of prophecy. Oh, it is this document. There we go. Fair use. Know that a lot of certain things are copyrighted. Settlement certificate, also known as a quote, birth certificate, since 1837, is an official document issued to validly recorded poor paupers, granting them certain basic rights and entitlement to benefits in exchange for recognition of their status as being owned as property and lawful slaves, also known as indentured servants and bondsmen. A settlement, therefore, is equivalent to a voluntary slave plantation. So that's the origin of it. They did it to basically disenfranchise people or keep them in a particular status. That's why they set up, you have the Poor Relief Act, 1662 document. So that's where those 3 documents came from. And they call it voluntary slavery. Let me see. Because of the deliberate legal, quote-unquote, laws of the late 18th and early 19th century, the number of paupers dramatically increased. This led to the most awful and cruel laws being introduced to deliver to an elite few the slave labor force needed for the Industrial Revolution through the Poor Law Amendment Act, 1834, which effectively stated that the poor could not receive any benefits unless they were constantly, quote, employed in a workhouse prison, Thus, despite international treaties against slavery, the very worst slavery being wage slavery or lawful slavery was born, whereby men, women, and children lived in terrible conditions and were worked to, quote, to death. Does that sound familiar? Yeah, I think that's very clear in what it stated there. Beginning from 1871, this is Canon 3358. Beginning from 1871, further historic changes in the administration of vital society. They lie about a lot of stuff. Changes in vital statistics such as birth certificates and death certificates with the introduction of health districts or sanitary districts, quote unquote. The Local Government Act of 1871, Public Health Act 1872, Public Health Act 1875, created a system of districts, quote unquote, called sanitary, concept of district health boards of guardians, including magistrates and other justices of the peace. So you also have the District of Columbia Act of 1871, which created that municipal corporate. A particular document, to be honest, I don't know where to find it online. I just have it. It's something I can provide in the drive in the private library. I really don't know where to find it. If donations over $50, I send this, out to, anybody that sends that. I apologize. Are you able to hear me better now? And you still able to hear me clearly? Yeah. Well, the problem is you have the mother being an informant on the birth certificate because, especially with slavery, the condition follows the mother, not the father. That's why marriage is so important, because the condition follows the father. Feminism and things like that to destroy the nuclear family, because the reason they even call it a nuclear family is because when a man and woman are joined, it becomes a quantum entanglement. Under biblical law, the woman's legal identity is subsumed into the man's legal identity, meaning the two become one in law and in reality. That's why it was such a heinous thing for divorce, unless in very grave circumstances. But the type of arrangement that they have now with licenses, people are essentially going to the state as their God and stating that the state is their God, being judge over them, and asking and requesting permission from the state as a God to grant them the right to marry under a general partnership where the state controls all of the interest. To kind of answer your question, the executor has rights to compensation from the estate. It's the same way with a trustee. It's the same way with the authorized representative. A workman is worthy of his hire. Now, how that's gone about, that's when it gets into the status correction and estate law and trust law. But yeah, I'm reading, this is just this one document. It covers like a lot of the canons. I tell people about marriage, they think I'm crazy. Yeah, honestly, honestly, most people don't really understand what biblical marriage or true marriage actually looks like. What they got with the marriage licenses under Roman law, contubernum, which is the status of two slaves being married together. But who owns the slaves? Somebody else. If somebody owns a man and somebody owns a woman by two different masters, if it makes business sense for them to separate, they don't have a say. So, true bill for executive services. I've heard the true bill thing, although I haven't seen a good, clear example of it. One of the things that I know about is like sending invoices for fees. That's why a fee schedule is important, because when you're invoicing, you're invoking, you're calling, out certain things that have already been declared. That's why you have a fee. Yeah, I've always heard people say to send a true bill, but like I said, I haven't seen like a true example of it. But yeah. So yeah, honestly, there's a few things out there. Another good resource to study trust law is maxims. Like, maxims govern like almost everything. Let me see. There are 3 entities on this marriage. Do you see the state in your bedroom? Marriage workshop, voyeurism. I'm not familiar with the exact definition of voyeurism. I gotta look that up. Honestly, they are acting like a third party, though, for sure. And when I got my marriage annulled, that is something that I alleged when I rescinded my signature and consent. There being no full disclosure that they were an actual party to the application. I gave notice and all that. I mean, that's a valid point to, annulling a lot of those unconscionable contracts, which are really trusts, but they have to be, essentially wound up. Well, they use a license to obtain consent. So you're essentially granting them license to consent to the transaction under that particular law form using the trust or the application, which subjects you to their rules and their laws. Right. You already, and that's the thing. They can only license a marriage of persons. If you got a living man and woman, they can't decide those things. That's something that's written in the book of Jasher. Pharaoh Rikion, the first Pharaoh, he was called Pharaoh because he was the first one to institute a tax on the dead, to bury the dead. Well, that has more implications than you think, especially with presumptions of death, because they tax the dead as soon as there's a presumption there. And that's how they get the wage slavery. And you already have the right to, as a living man or woman, you have the right to marry another living man or woman. The problem comes about when you've got suretyship agreements and contracts for the legal person that the legal identity that they set up for you. That's what has tied, and dissolved a lot of marriages, is really financial issues. It's because they use financial means to enslave every man, woman, and child. Is there a map to follow once you gain a level of understanding? It's honestly, it's more of a conscious thing, like conscience or sentier, because at that point it becomes like equity. You have the laws or the maxims of equity. There's more than 20, but the 20 main ones show you how equity operates. And then there's additional maxims of equity. Like, the maxims tell you, because they're already proven and you don't have to prove the maxims, they govern a lot of reasoning as far as transactions, interactions, accounts, etc. That's why self-governance is something that I talk about so much, because the grantor has the right to set up the trust under whatever law form the settler chooses, and that's under the the convention relative to trust and their recognition and all that by the Hague. So that's something that can be set up. Does anyone else feel like it's dirty? I'm just talking about this crap. Honestly, there's been plenty of times where it does. There's a lot of times it gets frustrating. You'll be sitting there and getting mad and all this stuff, but the problem is they literally use anything you say. They say they'll use everything you say against you. They can and will use everything that you say against you. So they're going to use your emotions to play on you if you get emotional about certain things. And a calm mind learns more easily than an enraged one. So you have to you have to really master your emotions. It's just the truth. Because, you know, I've been there, believe me, for long periods of time. I've been there just plain fuming, you know, not doing super well because, you know, I'm just, ultimately you just have to accept that they are who they are and they do what they do. So the only thing you can really change is what you do, your response to it. Instead of being in a reactionary state, you choose your response. So that allows you to control how your situation unfolds after that point. Damn. My ire is up and it's not Jamaican ire. I'm not totally sure what you mean by that. I'm not sure if that's like some slang out there or if it's just a term I'm unfamiliar with. You might have to elaborate on that. I'm told you don't need to use case law. A few good maxims of equity should be enough. Really, honestly, you do kind of need certain cases. It depends on how you're going about it. But when you're trying to show certain things are applicable and certain other things, especially using precedent, you do kind of need case law. You still need maxims as well in connection with it, but you do have to have case law. Because case precedents bind judges. Because if they go against precedent and all that stuff, now they got to create an entirely new precedent, which means they're going against the mainstream of all of the flow of court cases. Yeah, it's the stages of grief. It's the stages of loss and mourning. You know, anger, you know, sadness, depression, avoidance, and finally like acceptance. You know, all those different stages. There might be a couple others I missed, but yeah, you really do kind of agree. I have gone through like just about every one. You know, yeah, it does get you know. That's what I mean by map. Oh, like yeah. Well, honestly, if you're really talking about more of like the spiritual or consciousness level aspect, it comes down to essentially just your level of consciousness, the dark night of the soul, the you know, the alchemy, the transmutation of the soul from darker energies to higher energies. You know, accepting you can't change what you can't accept. So you have to accept the situation as it is and make the necessary changes to create and promote a better future here and now, because the future happens right now. It's essentially a continuation of the present. Yeah. There are certain persons to notice. Yeah, there are certain persons you have to notice. There's a lot that you can do, putting things on just the, you know, deeds office, public newspaper goes a long way. Certain non-UCC notices, especially from the point of like a trust aspect, like the trust filing certain notices, that goes a long way too. Jamaican Saint Erie is a good feeling. That's what I've heard. Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, okay. Dang, does it let me scroll up? It doesn't let me scroll up. Yeah. That's good to know, though. There's certain person, yeah. But honestly, there's a lot of different traps. Like, you know, there's a lot of words that are portal terms. Like, you'll say one thing and it'll trap most people in a whole jurisdiction, all because they said one word. Like income, very jurisdictional term, versus compensation, which is derived from personal labor or services. You know, there's a bunch of different other ones, and a lot of them are like word spells. So where, you know, you'll say one thing, but it's got 3 different words based on the same pronunciation. And, you know, 4 different spellings. You do have to invoke equity. Equity is something that you have to invoke And that invocation is what, basically allows you to access the equity itself. There's certain words that you can use. I'm still, like I said, you can seal the court record, you can still do certain things, you can allege that there's no adequate remedy at law. However, that's when it becomes a gray area, because there are actually remedies at law that you can use. Civil presumption of death and things like that. It's not always civil, but it's, things like that. Like, there are actually remedies, but you have to go super far and dig to find them. But that's why you have different. Yeah, they're casting spells. They really are. Relief. Yeah, it's something that you obtain. Yeah. Words and sentences are all spells, because they, especially properly formed sentences, they invoke power and manifestation with using creative language or non-precatory language. Let me see. There's other ones. One of the maxims that give me a lot of understanding is Ayodum. Where is it? No. It's in here somewhere. Oh, that was it. You do everything you can to reserve the rights and qualify your signatures where you can. Correct your status, Department of Homeland Security. Too many people found out about it, I think. That's why there's the American national stuff is so important, because it does change your status as far as U.S. citizenship and nationality, and being a national but not a citizen of the United States and things like that. The chancellor's equity and inequity is able to pivot, go into and out of, and override that law. Yes, because equity is, quo quid constituitur eodum modo dissolvitur destruitur. In the same way in which anything is constituted, in the same way it is dissolved, destroyed. So the same way you got into something is the same way you got to get out of it. And that's why you have to attack the root cause or the root issue. Otherwise, it's like, pulling up weeds and leaving the roots. The weeds are going to go right back, and you're going to be dealing with the same issue again. So you have to dig up the problem at its roots. Is a national still a subject? Depends on what type of national. If it's a foreign national, private American national, not so much. Not with respect to U.S. national, that's slightly less in status, but more than a U.S. citizen. And then, private citizens are technically just trusts and entities. That's when you get into situs and location of assets and jurisdiction, things like that. But, yeah. Australia is in a geographical sense. District of Columbia is a 10-mile square. They set up multiple 10-mile squares. Created a lot of them, but they're the same. It's principally there, and right over there where it's currently located, DC. Yeah, there's a few other things. Honestly, the maxims give you the framework, because the maxims are like the invocations or the spells that constitute the equity and allow you to be able to go into and invoke the proper things, because they're already proven, and they've got a Latin version of them, and then they got an English version of them. And I tend to be of the opinion that English did not stem from Latin. Latin came from English, because I've found certain things that talk about English being like the primary language, that English was what was spoken by the American Indians and tribes before, you know, conquistadors and Dum Diversus and Unum Sanctum and, you know, the Papal Bulls came about with Columbus and the other things like that in the 1400s, because, you know, you go into their laws and their statutes, and the Unum Sanctum, that's in Latin. But, you know, over here, you know, Europe, you have over... So this, the Book of Maxims, is, let me see, rules and law and equity, most in use. This was, let me see, and it was published in 1823. And yeah, this is a pretty good collection right here, honestly. There's another book called like Bouvier's Maxims of Law. That Book of Maxims is good. There's a few different things. Yeah, subjects are like the crew. Well, and that's the thing too, is like the way that they use the word spells, once they classify you as dead, you know, what do they have? They have a corpse, an empty vessel, because the spirit, the soul, the consciousness has passed on from the body. So now you going from being someone to somebody. You know, that's why you can't say you are a body. No, you are the one inside the body, inhabiting the body, moving the body. The body is property. The name is property. The consciousness is the real being. Yeah, you're supposed to under the quantum grammar rules, but anything in all caps is still in the realm of the dead. It's still just a means of controlling what's already in that realm using the hyphens. Can they decide to seal the record, or can it only be done by your request? They can, but they have to have a significant interest. Like, a lot of times they'll go and allege like national security and stuff like that, and other things, just to be able to enforce that. But most of the time it's done under motion to seal the record due to alleging you know, trade secrets or confidential information or something, or sensitive information, things like that. And it's very limited circumstances, and I've done it before, but like I said, the suit wasn't set up all the way, and you know, it's possible. It's just, you have to know how to do it. There's certain rules like FRCP, Federal Rules of Civil Procedure, for it. How can we be a name anyway? You can't. That's the problem. People keep thinking that they're calling themselves the property. But if you really think about it, you're the consciousness. Unless you really, when you say that you're the body or the name, you become the body or the name, and you lose your consciousness. You become essentially just on autopilot, and it allows, you know, you become the vessel, and you become the ship, and someone else as captain or the director, you know, then they come in and possess the vessel. Well, that's the same witchcraft that they use to control the body. So, you know, they've thrown you off the ship, stolen the body, registered the body as a vessel under the berth, through the berth canal, in the harbor, through dry dock, in the court, you know, because you're docking through the docket. So you're going through and dry docking in that docket, and going and, you know, basically just allowing them to offload all of your goods and resources, all of your cargo from your ship, your vessel, which is your labor and your services. Yeah. So, I mean, that's how they get it. And that's why, like, you know, sirens. If you know what the Greek story about the sirens are, there's a reason that they call, you know, them like cruisers and sirens and things like that, because those same sirens are the sirens that would wreck men's ships, you know, and cast them into the sea. That's the same thing that happens today. You know, I'm not going to talk about it exactly who uses them, you already know, but it's the same thing. Nothing changed. They just were speaking in allegories to talk about the real things. Did you study on your own, or did you have a mentorship? You know, to be honest, I didn't actually have a mentor. I have a couple good, associates that kind of studied with me, kind of helped. They really helped. Like, I wouldn't be here if it weren't for them. But really, like, it just came from a lot of studying and a lot of experience. Like, there were a lot of people that I either took classes from or read a lot of books from. But for the most part, I really had to do a lot of studying myself, because for a really long time, I had no idea what I was doing. I was just kind of doing stuff, finding credible people and doing what they told me and figuring out what worked and what didn't, and had a whole lot of things didn't work that more so than they did. And at the end of it, I was left, after sifting through all of that and finding things that did work, I have, firsthand experience of what happened. And you really can't make it up. The surname is theirs. No, it's not. But you gotta you have to rebut their claim. Yeah, a siren is a sea witch. That's why you have the makeup and all that. That's why you have the siren song, or the sirens, as they cry down the streets. Really, can you help with that one where you find that 7-1? The Pope Prince has confirmed this. Yeah, if you can provide a link or something, or after this, we jump off here, put it in the comments of the live, yeah, that would be very helpful. But honestly, that's what I've been hearing. But the thing is, most people just don't know about copyrights. Copyrights are the trusts, because if you own the rights to the use of a name, you have the rights to use it. So that means you have the rights and you have the use, regardless of whether you have the title. That's grantor and beneficiary positions. That's enough to enforce a claim as of beneficial ownership for intellectual property such as a name. Yeah. Well, it's only... See, people call it a conspiracy theory, but it's only a theory until it's proven. And really, that's why they try to hide certain things, to keep people from being able to prove it. But it's still true. It doesn't take away the fact that it's true. I mean, that's why they try to say, there's no objective truth. Nah, that's just because they're lying. They're trying to hide it. They want you to think that's the case, but yeah. There's never been anything new under the sun. It's the same playbook. When you go back to Exodus and you read how, Pharaoh wanted to throw all the babies in the river, there is some level of that was allegorical, and there was the literal aspect of it. There were babies that were thrown in the river also, and there were records taken of that. But there was also the delivery aspect of it financially, because the midwives were essentially acting as trustees and protecting the children. So they were protecting the children and saying that they had already been given birth before they got there. And so delivery had already taken place. So once the livery in season had been completed, there was no way for them to be able to state that, there was a placenta or afterbirth for them to take and cause a presumption of death. The only thing they own is the all caps name, but the rights to the all caps name, now that's what you got to control. That's what has to be owned by the trust. That's what has to be owned as part of the estate res, and that's what you have to move into trust. You do, but honestly, the biggest thing is finding good people that you can actually trust. Because there's a lot of people that hear about it and kind of want to parasite off of your energy and doing all this. You really have to put in the work. And I'm not saying you have to spend years and years doing it. It just depends on how quickly, how long it takes you to get to that particular level. Like, my level 20 is, maybe nothing compared to somebody's level 100. But the time it took to get to those respective levels, like, sometimes there's really just no comparison. Like, everybody has their own path, and for you it might only take 2 months, 3 months of super hard studying if you've already had like a background that like relates to it because of work experience or something like that. you know, and sometimes it might take a little bit longer, you know, it just depends. Everybody's different. Yeah, you're right. That's what it is, because they were claiming that they're under that body of Christ, you know, that corpus. You know, Pope Leo X in 1514 stated that it was a fable, and it was, you know, it was a lie. So in that same year, you know, the Encyclopedia Britannica holds that there was a legend, which is also an inscription on a codex or a map. It stated that Eleazar, the high priest, Aaron's, you know, the same Aaron that helped Moses, and he served as a priest, his son Eleazar was requested by Ptolemy II Philadelphus in 1514, or shortly prior to that, to essentially translate the Hebrew manuscripts and codexes into the first Bible, which they compiled and added the New Testament to. Now, when they did that, you know, they finished it in 1514, the same year that Pope Leo X, who had direct governance and, you know, guidance on, you know, putting out and publishing that book, that Bible, you know, the Computension Polyglot Bible, and it was finished in 1514 and ran for like a few years until like 1521, as it said. And Pope Leo X said, you know, how profitable the fable of Christ has been for us and our predecessors. You know, so yeah, that told me a lot. And this was something that I had attested in an affidavit by the Bible Museum, essentially the curator of the Bible Museum out, you know, in Arizona. So, with a wet ink signature, for him to be able to assert that, you know, that wasn't his main point in the affidavit, but he did state it. Yeah, a lot of this is repaying karmic debt, because essentially what's happening is the women being informant and giving up the baby are essentially they're becoming witches in doing so, because, like I said, vital registry, vital statistics, that's the book of the damned. It's a leasehold registry. It's a registry of, you know, the Darkhold is a leasehold, and when they talk about in the Marvel movies. So, you know, that's why it's not a good thing. That's why every name that gets written in that book of the dead becomes dead, because it's a register of fictions, a register of everything in the realm of the dead. Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. There's other things that, you know, processes that can be done. There's delayed registration of births. They don't like it, and you have a hell of a hard, well, I won't say a hell of a hard time, but there's a very difficult aspect of, you know, doing that, because without all the proper estate set up and all this, you know, CPS and other agencies tend to like to claim jurisdiction and things like that. It doesn't make it right, again, but that's how they claim jurisdiction. And the other thing about appellations is that appellations goes back to, like, I think Christian doctrine too, though, because a name is really a title, and a title is a symbol, or a symbol or a representation of the real thing. It's the intangible representation of the real thing. That's what I mean. I know that, you know, that whole appellation thing, but that definition is more Christian, because ultimately, like, the corporation is there to represent the real thing. That's what it's there for. You have to have a trust notarized. Depends on what type of trust. If you're dealing with a foreign express trust, like formed under the common law, it depends on the jurisdiction. But a lot of times, you know, yeah. As far as, like, you know, an indenture or a private trust agreement, you know, where it's just witnessed by 2 to 3 witnesses, or it's private parties, you know, men, women, etc., like, Yeah, nah, you don't have notaries on that. You know, if you do an inter vivos trust, a lot of times, yeah, it just depends on how you're gonna go about it. You know, looking on what states and what jurisdictions recognize like witnesses on trust documents as opposed to notaries. Because a notary is the officer of the Secretary of State, which handles foreign affairs. So they're already the use of the notary, they're already recognizing you to be foreign. But you got to add in caveats and different things to basically keep them from getting jurisdiction, to properly retain it. I'm about to have honestly, if you can get your parents to help you, your mother and father, like, go for it. Mine weren't supportive. They're Christians, so I'm not really worried about that. But yeah, especially if you can, go for it. They're first-hand witnesses to the event. First-hand testimony. That's the closest degree of testimony, really. Unless they just do all this, figure they're stuffed. You're not stew. Yeah. I'm in no contact with the rents. But I've had the phrase emancipated. Yeah, although, to be honest, I've looked into the emancipated minor thing, and the emancipated minor is really only for, literally for, people under 18 years of age, because it's dealing with custodianship of the actual, the child. So it's that thing is really only for that. When it comes to anything beyond 18 years, you're looking at, because you're looking at corporate structure. Because a child, a minor, a corporation and a child are both considered minors in law because they cannot speak for themselves legally. So, yeah, and that's the problem. People need to stop agreeing to stuff they don't understand. Just because you think you know the answer does not mean you'll know the answer unless you've really looked into it yourself. That's what due diligence means. Because, it's legalese. That is an entirely other language. That's why, they got that videos of that. And it really is another language. And if you don't know how to speak it, you're pretty much dead in the water. Which is why a lot of reasons why you're supposed to either do an abatement, abatement at common law or an equity, and under the deficiencies process due to the name, caption, case, etc. And then even then special appearance, but then physical actual appearance, that just gives them jurisdiction, because what is the estate? It's your body. So why would you give them jurisdiction intentionally? Because a lot of these courts are nisi prius courts. And if you look up nisi prius courts, if there's no contract, well, shoot. You know what? I think I actually had that. The Treaties on the Law of Names and Changes of Name. I think that's actually in here. Hold on. Where's the Law of Names? Only ghosts appear. Well, kinda. Only ghosts are summoned. I'll say that. But you still have to appear before certain things. Maybe not in the way that most people expect, because the courts, those are the temples of Baal. That's why you have bailments. That's why you have bailors, bailiffs, bailees, bail bonds. Yeah, it's the same Baal in the Old Testament. It's no different. It's because people went astray and stopped worshiping the Most High. Let me see if I can find that. The Treaties on the Law of Names. I wonder if this is it. Names and changes of names. I believe that's it. And corporeal hereditament. So that's what it is. Yeah, right. Lands, tenements, and hereditaments. Yeah, that's it. That's good to know that that's the term, though. I'm gonna screenshot that. Shoot. I'm glad you caught that. I knew that they fell under lands, tenements, and hereditaments, but now I know exactly how they fall under that. Yeah, this book, because you can change your name for any lawful reason. Now, the only time it gets different is when you deal with the legal name. The only reason it's really a legal name is because they bound you to it as surety. Other than that, you can have any amount of legal names under the common law. Now, there's like 4 states where that's not applicable, and I believe Louisiana is one of them. And there's like 3 other places that don't have that. But yeah, that's just something to kind of change. Because you can, like, a lot of places with common law, which is like 46 states, you can adopt, you can just start using any common law name for any reason. The problem has really become with the law, the Patriot Act and, 9/11 and, all the different counterterrorism security laws and national security laws that try to force the personage involving with the IDs and stuff like that to, be able to operate. But really, as long as you're doing everything lawfully and you're not just, creating a whole bunch of debts in another name and, leaving them, and you're doing everything in good faith, I mean, you can change your name for any reason. But yeah, let me see if I can find it. Incorporeal. Yeah, it's right here. You're right. Yeah, let me see. Custom regards it as a fixed hereditary right that a son should inherit his surname from his father, and inasmuch as a name ordinarily must be inherited, it is presumably a hereditament, and that being so, an incorporeal one. Yeah, you were right. So that's what it is. The surname is an incorporeal hereditament, and that falls under the lands, tenements, and hereditaments of the Susquehanna Act. Yeah, I'm thinking about doing this every week. For now, I'm thinking about doing Thursday. I might do it earlier. I'm gonna just see how it goes. Let me know what y'all think in the comments. Especially once this thing gets posted and we're done. And I'll probably might go like 15 minutes, 30 more minutes. We'll see how it goes. But yeah. Any specific questions? Shoot, throw them in the chat, because I covered a decent amount of stuff. And I've been talking for 2 hours, so I want to see what y'all actually want to know. Yeah, I'm grateful for everybody that's been watching. I hope it's really helped quite a bit. I've definitely put in a lot of time into understanding how the world works. It's quite different than what they present it to be. But yeah, I'm very grateful, for everybody that takes the time in, especially that stayed on this live and stuff. Like I said, any additional questions you got, just let me know. Throw them in the chat, and I'll do my best to answer them where I can. Thank you. I'm grateful. Those letters, so those were some of the beginnings of the estate paperwork. Now, there's 2 different types of probate. One is common form, which is done through particularly like the deeds office, court record, like that. It depends on how public deeds are recorded in your area. But that's, part of the initial process. I went like way beyond what most people have to do. I did that, the common form. I did through the courts, through the probate court, where I was acknowledged as the executor, filed a will on behalf of the decedent, because, the living man is the one with the will that controls the decedent, the fiction, because the trust is according to the intent and purpose of the grantor. So, I filed got the will acknowledged and probated, and then, I was acknowledged as the executor of the estate. But the other way is you literally, county recorder and creating your own deeds. Like, the other thing they don't talk about is you have the power. You have all the power you need to be able to do these things without having to go to them and ask for permission. Now, it becomes a little gray area when you try to just shotgun and force it all. It's not really like the best point of action. I like to really just cover my basis on the things that actually matter. So there's like the name change from all caps to upper and lower, and what else like the status correction, the American National Papers, the private trusts, setting up the trusts and conveying the estate over to the private trust to change the law form, to equity, pre-1933 equity, and for mine, it's my spiritual beliefs under the Old Testament, things like that. So, there's a few different things there, but like honestly, that specific estate part is there's like the notice of forgiveness and discharge, the notice of appointment of executor, the fee schedule for the all caps name, fee schedule for the upper and lower name, ordinance of estates, and that comprises like everything that Tammy Pepperman was talking about. Now, Tammy Pepperman, she I don't know if she just only stayed with that, but she knew quite a bit of other stuff as far as administration of courts. She studied a lot, but at least from the videos that I was able to find, and I probably I don't think I was able to find all of them, really. There was probably quite a few that were taken down by the time I had found her information. But, from the stuff I had found, she didn't really talk about anything prior to 1666. Let me see. They do help. I've seen, yes, I've used them personally, and they do help. Please speak once again on static correction, how it can be done. Like, is there a website or a forum? Honestly, I just have I mentioned a couple processes a few different times. Like I said, it's mainly trust in estate law, being acknowledged as the executor, whether it be in the deeds office and creating your own deeds, and going to the probate courts, and getting, appointment as executor, or doing, all that. It just depends. How do I sign my name? Okay, hold on. This is going to be in print. I don't write in cursive because to write in cursive is to curse your own name. Absolutely, Jay. No worries. I'm grateful to be able to help other people, because honestly, I went through a lot of struggles, and I don't want people to have to go through it if I can help them avoid it. If you fail to invoke the reason, fail to have a clean hands and blow the exclusivity, what could be a consequence? Locked away, also. To be honest with you, that is something that is it's something to be aware of, not necessarily afraid. Honestly, the best possible thing is staying out of their courts and handling it either administratively or entirely in equity, like through special appearances where you're not there physically, because like I said, these courts are Nisi Prius courts, and you don't. Yeah, I've heard the horror stories too. I've gone through some of them. Not all of them. Grateful for that. Grateful for that. But yeah, it's very difficult to invoke that when they're intentionally trying to change the presumption against you. You have to be very, very careful. You're walking a paper thin line in that courtroom, and it's like you got to really know what you're doing. But if you talk about how I sign my name, let me see. It would be Doe, comma, John, Henry, and then it would be comma, General executor and sole beneficiary. Now, the reason why I do it like this is twofold. One, that's capitis diminutum nolo. Capitis diminutum nolo is no loss of status. It's all lowercase. However, you have to set up your trusts and the status and the corporate structure all together to where you invert the entire thing. Instead of capital letter name owning you as property, you now control the capital letter name and own it as property from the all lowercase name. That's the difference. So, you know, the problem is people keep thinking that their name is spelled in upper and lower. No, because you're still capitalizing on your name. You're not supposed to capitalize on your name, because then it makes you the property as the surety for your name. Now, if you create a business in entirely different name, it's a whole different story. But all lowercase as it is, you know, currently is, it's seen as property for the corporate fiction because they gave corporate fictions all the rights. So to acknowledge that, you have to control everything and own nothing, which is the trust owns it, the trust owns the estate, the estate owns the LLC owns all the partnerships, the agreements, and all that stuff. That's actually how I did my passport, yeah, all lowercase. How does one correct their nationality? There's a specific set of forms. Anna von Reitz talked about it, and they keep calling it the Article 928 because that's how she published her article discussing it. But it's like a deed of reconveyance, acts of expatriation from the corporation back to the land, declaration of naturalization that you create your own deed with. There's like a common law declaration, common carry declaration. There's paramount DNA claims where you're claiming all your DNA from the moment of inception. And then there's a few, like a declaration of political status. And there's like a few other forms with it. But that's the main stuff with it. That is something that you could use. Yeah, you do have the right to face your accuser. Although, when you're invoking constitutional rights, you still have to recognize that the British law is still in play. So that's the reason they sidestep a lot of the constitutional rights, because ultimately they declared the treaty, like the Treaty of Paris 1783, as the supreme law of the land, which still subjected everything else under British and British monarchical rule. And they gave applicability to the UK Westminster statutes, the Sesquier V Acts, and all that. So, that's absolutely. Yeah, thank you for watching. Thank you for coming on here. I'm grateful for it. Courts of law deal with controversies. Yeah, they do. They do. If they don't have a controversy, they don't have a case. It's just plain and simple. That's why there's a lot of conditional acceptance. Like the original A for V was a conditional acceptance and a return for value. It wasn't an A for V that they keep putting out in the public and getting people hemmed up with securities. Like, it was originally done in the courts. I know, she is a definitely... Well, I mean, she talks about the Count of Saint Germain. Like, Anna von Reitz. Like, I'm not really for her. Like, she does her own thing. But the fact that she mentioned, like, the Count of Saint Germain... The Count of Saint Germain was a vampire. And vampires are nothing but sorcerers that drink blood. So, I really don't mess with it. The Expatriation Act was enacted before the 14th Amendment was ratified. Yes, the Expatriation Act is how... Yeah, that's how you do it, actually, is expatriation. That's why it's part of the American national paperwork that she was talking about. She, like I said, she had good stuff with the process. It doesn't mean I agree with her on a lot of other stuff. Yeah, absolutely. David Straight. Yeah, David Straight talks about it. David Straight, I feel like he's more a little straight shooter than most. But he's still kind of a patriot type. And he's not the original people of the land, to be honest. Caucasians are not the original peoples in America. They just aren't. And that's nothing against them. the ones that are seeking to do right. But what I'm talking about is the ones specifically instituting like certain agendas and, that helped with Tulsa, Oklahoma, with overthrowing Black Wall Street and the Wilmington insurrection of 1898. I'm talking about those. Yeah. No, she's not a real judge. You'd have to give her jurisdiction for her to be a judge over you. Yeah. I don't really mess with her. Yeah, it's kind of, there's a lot of people out here that like really like to say they know everything, and you got to be able to back up what you say, like, because honestly, what good does it do to say a bunch of stuff in the public if you can't prove it in court? Because then you're just gonna have to go through and do the work yourself again. That's why, like I said, I point to everything that I can as far as laws and statutes, because there's no point in making it up. It sounds too crazy even when you tell the truth. What about before getting all those done? How would you sign through navigation? Authorized representative. Yeah. Authorized representative is how you should go about it. You're considered the personal representative for the fiction, the decedent. That's one of the points that I had to make sure, that when I probated the estate, was that, I'm the appointed personal representative and executor of the estate. What if your birth date is different than your current? See, the thing is, like, getting your name change done, it's important to just get it done. If you can get it done in the birth county from where you are now, has the most power. However, you'll have to do more if you do it where you're currently at. But doing it where you're currently at is still better than nothing, and it is still a claim of life that you can use. Although I would look into the Full Faith and Credit Act and getting that either apostilled or authenticated, so that you can use it in your birth state. So that, and even like, let's just say, for example, too, like your current state, you'll still need an LLC out there, whether you go through Delaware and incorporate the principal domestic entity LLC out there, and then set up the foreign LLC in the state you're actually in. Either way, you're still going to need an LLC in wherever you're at. So that is something, that kind of thing. So you're going to be dealing with a lot of like your current state and the state you're originating from. But as far as like the original accounts, they're all in the original birth state, and they stay there in that original county. So there's certain suits that have to be like the presumption of death suit, like the final one, the codified Sestike AV, because there's a presumption of death statute in every state. But that suit is going to have to be filed in the birth county. David Straight is like, he's got some good things. He knows enough to be, he's not really putting it all out in the public. But that's not to say that he's not right about a lot of things. It's just his processes, I'm not exactly sure, because I haven't dug into his processes. But, the stuff he said, a lot of the things he said is true. Yeah. Your birth certificate's not all caps. However, neither is my original. Neither is it. Because here's the thing. That's in capitis diminutio minima. When it's spelled in proper case, it's still spelled first, middle, last. When you put your given name before your family name, your surname, it creates the legal fiction. So it creates what's called a common law corporation sole when it's in upper and lower under British law. And a corporation sole under British law does not need any articles. It does not need any incorporating documents or charters. It can be formed solely out of the use in common law and trade. And that's what happened. You used the name, you said it was yours, you used it in different areas and aspects of your financial life. And that gave rise to that corporation sole. But you still need, the Social Security account is in all caps. So you still need to do the process all caps, upper and lower, regardless. Yeah, no, nobody knows everything. Like, a lot of these good, a broken clock is right twice a day. Once if you're on military time. But, so, even when people are wrong about a lot of things, it's not to say that they still can't be right some of the time. Yeah, they do transfer it to the current doctor. That's why they're called witch doctors, because they're not healers. They're in line with the farm, the big pharma, the plantation. Doesn't matter if it's all caps or if it's joining of the surname. Honestly, yeah, it to a point, it just becomes like they created a fiction in that first, middle, last, and that's the entire thing became deceased. If your name isn't spelled in all lowercase, it's not really in proper status. Yeah, a lot of people's processes, they think they're out, but until you get that court order where you get access to all the credit and all of the assets and resources that they stole from you and blocked from you by reason of presumption of death, you ain't out. If you still got a separate estate that's different from you and alienated from you, and you're still presumed dead, it's not complete. See, but the thing, honestly though, the all caps, it is mainly that though, because it's not the entire part of it, but it is a big part, because doing the name change from all capital letters to upper and lower is considered a bill of reviver under the Cestui Act, and it shows that you're living. So it is a huge portion of it. It's just not the entire thing. Yeah, it does have to be done in the birth location. The presumption of death, and that's something that's state specific. The state created the presumption, and the state has to undo it. So by the same way a thing is formed and constituted, the same way it's dissolved. Yes. The reason why you're only changing it to proper case instead of all lowercase is because the proper case is still an estate, but it's a living estate. It's an estate for a living man or woman. That's the difference. Yeah. Yeah. Honestly, it's a hyphen and colon. That's why it's like this. So, you have the by, colon, surname, colon, and then, oh shoot, I missed it. I forgot the hyphen. There we go. That's how you're supposed to do your name. I apologize. I missed it. If your certificate of live birth is in all caps, it's just, you really just got to do the name correction from all caps to upper and lower. That's really, it just further, yeah, you got to go through that. With your dad's certificate, what is it, a death certificate? If it's a death certificate, you got to do the paperwork to go claim the estate. And then get an EIN, file the proper estate forms with the IRS, and gain fiduciary authority over the estate. You have a claim as an heir, but remember, that's all dealing with ecclesiastical law under equity, especially when you're dealing with the private side of the estate, not necessarily just the public. What should I do with my dad's death certificate? Yeah, your dad's death certificate, yeah. Your CUSIP report will help. That will kind of help to enforce the, doing that. But yeah, you're gonna have to definitely you're gonna have to do some of the same papers I showed with the forgiveness, the executor appointment. You'll have to get an embossed seal for his estate. Create that. They'll have to do the tax paperwork, file for an EIN for his estate. There's multiple ways to file for an estate EIN, domestic and foreign. So you just really got to get an estate EIN. And yeah, once you do that, because not every probate court is going to recognize that. You can get, some courts might recognize you, but again, all these courts are private trading companies. So at the end of the day, you got to know how to administer a business. Honestly, they stole the estate. There was still all of the value derived from the actuarial tables with the insurance accounts and stuff like that allow that. So, yeah, that's kind of why. Yeah, dealing with that. You're going to have to basically just kind of go in and handle it all through the taxes and stuff like that, because ultimately, the IRS dealing with, special trust funds and things like that, it goes under the Crown estate, and it helps to settle a lot of those issues. I have no, is there a time limits on that? Nah, because here's the deal. Like, they had a specific STKV statute that said that it you couldn't go after it after age 20, but it was a deliberate fraud, and Thomson Reuters admitted it. So they acknowledged the deficiency of the statute itself. Fraud vitiates everything. Even the broad seal of a commonwealth crumbles into dust as against the interest designed to be defrauded. That was from a court case called Cobo versus Foster in the 1800s. It was published by the Pennsylvania Democrat. Yeah. The only thing is you got to have it like declared and enforced, because the original STKV Act was set up that any conveyances, or transfers of property against a STK use or the beneficiary of the estate, they were valid regardless. So you're gonna have to get that declared and acknowledged to really be able to enforce that and making it binding. So yeah, that's something you got to do there. Let me see. There's a lot of... Shoot, any other questions? Shoot, go for it. This is the time. Yeah. My BC name is the last, first, middle, but after romanization, my naturalization certificate, it isn't first, middle, last. Which one is appropriate for declaration of status? I'm curious what you mean by BC name before naturalization. Are you talking about in a different country? Like what country, if you don't mind me asking? Because the naturalization process is effectively a conveyance of the estate. However, the original, I believe, placenta and afterbirth remain in that original country. Although the proceeds and the titles and the interest do get transferred upon naturalization. It really is. And people don't know it applies because they just hear about it, and when they first get started into the whole straw man theory, and then they're like, oh, well, I can just do this and XYZ. But there's a whole lot of stuff you got to study to be able to enforce it. And that's what people don't realize. Like, you got to be able to know how to prove it. Because, yeah, it does exist. And, yeah, it's what's underlying everything. But if you can't, explain it and illustrate it before court, they just look at you like, oh, you don't know. We can do whatever we want. Like, so, you got to be able to, like I said, enforce that and be able to prove your claim. Don't come in there naked where you don't have anything proven. You got to come in there with the proof and the evidence to where you can prove you're a competent witness, able to testify. Yeah, fraud is one of the highest burdens of proof. Like, literally. Like, it's huge. That's why they do so many things with intelligence. Like, you got CIA and FBI and all that stuff. When really, those are just prisoner of war agencies, if you read the Geneva Convention. But, but yeah. See, enforcement is never discussed by the gurus. Honestly, yeah, because the thing is that people get so wrapped up in theories, and it's like they don't realize there becomes like rule or theory, and then there becomes actual application. And application is the life of rule. That's actually a maxim, like an old maxim. So it's already proven. Like, you know, so when you're dealing with law, you have to figure out what actually applies. That's why, you know, trust law is so important, because trust law, you like literally the grantor decides how the property is held, what law form it's held under, where the situs of the trust is located, you know, everything is in regards to the trust. You know, it's, and that's why, because governments are trust, they're corporations under their own private declarations. So yeah, you really have to know, you have to be able to know how to enforce it. You know, and there's a lot of different things you can do. There's for winding up trusts, antitrust lawsuits. There's which is the Clayton and Sherman Acts, 15 USC. You know, stuff like that. You know, copyright infringement claims. You know, if you properly copyright your name, and people don't understand, like, it's not that expensive to copyright your name. It depends on how you do it. If you do it statutorily, it's a whole lot. If you do it under the common law, it's not that much. But yeah, let me see. Yeah, I'm gonna need I don't know what you mean by the birth certificate name. It might be because it's in another country, how they do that, but I don't know what country it is. I can't really tell you. Shoot, any other questions? Yeah, I think it'll be next Thursday. I'm gonna see, you know. So hopefully hopefully we, you know, yeah, let me know what y'all think, if you want me to cover something specific, or, you know, next time. And I'll probably go about like maybe 15 more minutes just to see. But yeah, honestly, you know, yeah, once this live gets posted and all that, just like I said, just let me know in the comments like what you want me to cover next, and I'll definitely look into it. Yeah. Shoot. I think I'll have a little bit better grip on this whole live thing. This being my first time. I think next time I'll have a few other points that I could talk about. Yeah, honestly, I'm probably gonna have to do that. I'm gonna probably have to make a you know, a whole corporate chart, or, you know, a structured chart to show people how to properly structure their names and stuff, and their business. Because your name is your business. That's how you keep it private. Absolutely. Well, shoot, I don't charge for the you know, the information. The information needs to be put out there, because too many people are trying to put a world copyright on, you know, history, and, you know, lie and change things when they really shouldn't be. So the only thing I charge for is my time, if you need me to directly help you with something. But if other than that, I'll put the information out there. Yeah. Oh, that's clever. Road map for a vehicle. Yeah, honestly. Oh yeah. Yeah, that's what these are. That's why they get people in with a driver's license, because you got financial vehicles, and they're misrepresenting the terms of the financial vehicle because they got an interest in your estate, and then they superimpose that over the actual cop interaction and all that, and then that's how people get hemmed up, because they don't have their estate claimed, and, you know, the officers going and stealing estates. You know, it sucks, but it's what they do. Nah, don't say that. Don't say that. There's plenty of remedies. You just got to know how to do them. Yeah. No, we're like, you're only lost at sea if you're lost in the mind. Because everything's in the mind. The fifth dimension, the ether, intellectual property. It's all in the realm of the mind. If you can see it with your third eye, you can deal with it. Yeah, you have to be genuine and honest. The two highest frequencies in the universe is number one, authenticity, and the second one is love. So, oh, yeah. Most people are lost in general, honestly. That's why it's waking up can be a little bit painful at times, but it's really just so that you remember. Because if it wasn't painful, you'd still stay asleep. If I didn't have to go through the court case with my ex-wife, I wouldn't be here. So, it really is true. Yeah. Hey, I'm grateful. Honestly, it gets easier, believe me. Like, as long as you, because really, like what Jordan Maxwell said, the only like solution to it is education, like true education. And even education is kind of a bad portal term, but it's just knowledge. It's just learning the true knowledge and history and all that. Yeah, I did say ether. Yeah, ether is fifth dimensional energy. You have time, length, width, height, 3 dimensions. You have the time, fourth dimension, which is supposedly non-linear, but has linear aspects. And then you have fifth dimension, which is possibilities, future possibilities based on what's presently there in time. That's why it's an extra fifth dimension. And then you got higher energies beyond that. Hey, don't say that. I know it. I know them. The work is intentionally tries to keep you distracted, but do what you can each day. Honestly, I've spent years like compiling like the processes that actually work from the people that I've learned that know what they're talking about, and like I said, I'll do my best to put together like, I guess, a video or a post of some type of basically like everything, all the like the essential processes. I'm not gonna add any fluff in there. There's probably still other things you could do to reinforce your claim, like UCC, non-UCC filings by the trust over the estate, and different liens you can file on the estate and the county. But I'm not really gonna focus on that as much because those are like supplemental things. I'm gonna focus on the main, the root causes and the direct, how you deal with them in equity. So, yeah, I know. I'm grateful I'm in a locale where I don't have to worry about like re-upping it every year. But yeah, you do gotta keep that thing going, because honestly, that's the interface between the public and the private. The upper and lower name administering the all caps LLC. And I'm telling you, as soon as that thing went down, I had it down one time, had so many problems. So definitely keep it up. Like, I know it's fees sometimes are kind of hard, but that part is important. It really is. Hey, it'll get there. Believe me. When you get to that point and you get the wealth and abundance that they blocked by saying you were dead, the whole situation changes. Everything you ever did suddenly became worth it. Yeah, exactly. If you pull the roots out, there ain't nothing left. That's the whole ball of wax, as Christian Walter said. Yeah, it's just crazy. Like, because honestly, like, it's really looking in, it's seeing past the veil. Because, like, life and death are in the power of the tongue. So, that corporate veil that they're talking about, that's the veil between life and death. Like, they just don't put it like that in those terms. But that's what it is. you know, that's why everything is the way it is. And, you know, when they hide, you know, behind those corporate entities, they're, like Patrick Devine was saying, he was saying that, you know, the reason why a lot of those guys are able to get away with murder is because they're all in the realm of the dead. They're all in that corporate realm. So they're all dealing with, you know, one dead person killing another dead person. That's all in their jurisdiction. Like, I'm not saying it's right, I'm just saying that's how it's viewed. Keep on swimming through the Finding Nemo. Oh yeah, go look. I can tell you a couple movies. Finding Nemo's one. Mr. Nobody's another. Truman Show's a third. What else? The Big Short. Ryan Gosling. What else? I know there's a few movies I could think of. There's an anime called Sea, Money of Soul and Possibility. It came out in 2011. It was like a real short anime, but that thing tells you everything. They put it out there in that one. Yeah, they become narcissists because they lose their soul. Kingdom Hearts. Ooh, that's another one. The video game Kingdom Hearts, even if you don't play it, even if you just find out the storyline and like a couple, you know, cutscenes and stuff like that, the cutscene movies, oh my. Seeing as it's a Disney movie and all that, and how they tell it all. They tell like how all the spells happened. How somebody becomes a nobody and, you know, or someone becomes a heartless. Because a body with no soul that becomes corrupt is a heartless. And then, you know, a soul that becomes, you know, someone that loses their soul, is still conscious, becomes a nobody, or a nobody. You know, they have no body. You know. You know, with stuff like that, yeah, my parents and I didn't see eye to eye, and I know a lot of other people where it was a similar situation. Honestly, you got to know what you know and be willing to go the lengths to prove it and deal with it and live that way. And ultimately, like, yeah, that's kind of a personal decision. At what point it becomes a conflict. I know it's not easy, but you know, ultimately, if you know it's true in certain things, especially if you have that conviction, like, ultimately, if they're making an ultimatum, I mean, I don't know, I would personally choose my beliefs every time because, you know, I've learned all of this as a result of learning the Most High's name, Exodus 3:14. So, you know, I chose my beliefs every time because the Most High is taking care of me. That's the only reason I'm still here. Yeah, Jupiter Ascending, that's another one. They talk about the IRS. Interstate 60. I haven't seen that one. That's good. You know, you just gotta. That's kind of like a decision that takes a little bit of time. It's definitely not something that to be rushed, unless there's like threat of life or limb. But aside from that, it's kind of it's a heavy decision that takes time. You know. Shoot, it's how many rabbit holes there are, not just how deep they go. Hey, yo, there ain't once you see it, you can't go back. I could go on for a long time what I've seen, but a lot of it sounds a little bit far-fetched for YouTube. Maybe on a different platform. But I've seen plenty of stuff, Mandela effects included. So, yeah, I don't know why people think they're on a spinning ball floating through space. I don't get it. When the Earth says it's on the face of the Earth, every time you look at waters, they're always flat. You take a telescope, you'll be able to see beyond what the mathematical possibilities of the supposed curvature of the Earth are. You just need a bit more powerful telescope. Yeah, I mean, at a point, it just, yeah, you really can't go back. Yeah, it's so true though. Sanitary districts, I'm glad you talked on that. Sanitary districts are how they were instituting the CV-19. CV-19 is using the administration of the SKV accounts. That's why they had that in the first place. That's why they administered all that, because they were using the evidence of the birth certificate as presumption of death to administer those estates. But the sanitary districts are the quarantine areas. That's why you had the who, because who's on first, what's on second, I don't know's on third, like Abbott and Costello said. So that's why you had that entity controlling accounts. They do yeah, of course they talk about us as delusional. That's why you have to prove everything. It's only a conspiracy until it's proven. Then it's just a crime. Yeah, Popeye. Yo, what are some other movies that I've seen? I've seen a couple others that talk about stuff like this. What other ones I've seen? There's a couple I've seen a lot of anime that talk about it. There's Bleach is one of them. There's The Boy and the Beast, The Boy and the Heron. The Boy and the Heron was a Studio Ghibli movie, which is Spirited Away. Spirited Away is another anime movie that talks about contracts and the names and the souls and the spirit realm. Yeah. Idiocracy. Shoot, it's not idiocracy. These people are smart. But they're so smart, they forgot a couple things. And that's... They just kind of thought they would never see the detriment or the effects of it on their end. But, nah, it's a dulocracy. You got the rule of slaves over slaves. That's what's happening. Space is water. Yeah, absolutely. NASA was originally exploring the seas. And why did they all of a sudden stop exploring the seas? They found something crazy down there. Maybe Leviathan, stuff like that. Yo, the Ghostbusters thing. Hey, yo, for real. Pirates of the Caribbean. Yeah, that is true. And they talk about the cursed gold coins that they took, that affects all the pirates and turns them into ghosts. Yeah, that's it too. That's the judges. Ship of Fools. Waterworld. Is Waterworld a movie, or are you just talking about that? Yo. Yeah. That's crazy. Waterworld. Pirate Code. See, honestly, I'm glad you said that. Because Pirate Code, the UCC's law merchant, other than like 1-308 or the old 1-207, which is like all rights reserved or without prejudice, I really don't like the UCC, to be honest. Like, most of it's merchant law and negotiable instruments, but then you're just playing their games. And like, if you had the funds and had the means, you don't got to worry about that. You worry about the rules, the signatures, what kind of relationships you're creating, how the funds are held. Like, you deal with other matters. Other things. Like, that's why I don't like the UCC, to be honest. That's why I filed non-UCCs when necessary. But even then, it's still like Tammy Pepperman said, it's still attorney work product doctrine. So, for the most part, if you're gonna file a lien, do it in the county. Oh, Waterworld, Kevin Costner. I'm gonna have to check that out. I'm gonna see. Well, TV can definitely be a distraction, don't get me wrong. But honestly, on phones and stuff, like, you can Yeah, there's certain shows that kind of just tell it all, because the TV is the real news. Like Fox is a news media corporation, so they're telling the truth in movies and they're lying on the news. So yeah, you're right. It's still playing in the water, and that's like directly in line with the SKV Act. Like, if you're still playing by in commerce and all that stuff, and you're not going under equity under the laws of the land, and doing estate and trust law under equity and conveyancing, like, you're really not. You're still kind of lost, honestly, and that's why you really got to watch what law form you're going under, like. And yeah, it is their man-made laws. Yeah, that's really what it is. It was de facto practice and enforced as code. That's really all it is. It is soft disclosure. Yeah, all them movies. All them movies are how they tell people. You just have to have the eyes to see and the ears to hear. If you got that, you can see what they're saying. What other movies have I seen? I know there's been a bunch of others. And Mr. Nobody was a wild one, because there was two Mr. Nobodies. One that came out like a bunch of years back. I don't want to say within the last 10 or 15 years, and then there was another one in like 2022 or something like that, which didn't go into the same things. And I'm talking about the one, I forgot what year it was, but it was the one prior to the 2022, prior to the Hitman one. I've seen other shows. What other shows have I seen? Tales from Earthsea is another Studio Ghibli movie that talks a lot about it. They talk about the true name, the true name and the false, or the common name or whatever they use in the public, and how it's used as spells under witchcraft and stuff. Yes. Yes. The landlord is supposed to be saving all that money for the renter. That's why it's a fraud. Leasing is a fraud, because they're doing it for the benefit of the renter, but they're taking all the profits. It's a breach of fiduciary duty. So essentially, and then they're saying, oh, it wasn't a real trust, so they're not under legal obligation to enforce it. It's just a big fraud. And that's why I don't, leasing is no good. Yeah, they talk in symbology. That's the way they always speak the truth. Yeah. Primal Reversion in Pokemon, my son told me. He doesn't play it, but he's an avid reader. Huh. I might have to check that out. I'm gonna screenshot that one. Whew. Primal Reversion. I didn't know. My parents didn't let me watch Pokemon or anything like that. So, I don't know. That was something that I never really got into. I'm gonna have to check it out though. Hola Femme Nikita. Okay. That's why we're considered tenant in common on the land. Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. But the thing is, they transfer the deed to you, and then they make you the tenant. So they have to transfer it to your estate, and then they make you the tenant on the estate. That's why they're still holding your estate. Do I have a contact? If you check on my YouTube page, there is, I believe, a link tree. Actually, in most of my videos, I have a link to my website. And on my website, you can find like my email, and if you need to shoot me an email, I think my phone number might be up there. But yeah, that's probably the easiest way to get a hold of me. Yeah, I was homeschooled. I think of things differently than most people, but I still had a little bit of public schooling. But I got to see both sides of it. Being the outsider in both realms. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Everybody thinks they own everything. But to own anything in the legal realm, you have to be a fiction, because only the fiction can own the debt titles, like Christian Walters was saying. So for you to be that thing, you're essentially being the fiction. So yeah. Point of no return? Okay. I'm gonna have to check. I got some movies to watch. Oh yeah, okay. Let me get to Zoom one day and see all the yeah. Hey, honestly, I don't mind. I don't mind doing a Zoom. I just want to make sure that, you know, I get people that are willing to put in the time and the effort. And like I said, what I'll probably end up doing is I'll probably transition from lives to some type of Zoom call, or I don't know, you know, like Teams, Microsoft Teams. I'll figure out something. It'll be something. But I'm gonna see how these lives go, you know, weekly. I might do more than one a week. I'll see how it goes, you know, how reception is as far as the audience, and then I'll most likely transition into, you know, some type of Zoom. Wizard of Oz, yeah. The Wizard of Ounces, or Oz, the ounces of gold. Because you have the straw man, the tin man, the tax identification number, and then you have the lion, the courage, the heart. Signal? I haven't used Signal. I'm not against it. You know, I'm open to trying, you know, whatever I got to. I'll have to look into that though. I think I've heard of other people using that, but that might be something. Yeah. Man, I got so many movies to watch now. Oh man, I was in. Oh, and I do actually have another channel too, Haven of Harmonies, and that's something that if you search it, like there's a few solfeggio frequencies and stuff like that on there. I'm not sure if you know how many of you have heard, but solfeggio frequencies get rid of parasites. That's the reason why they got rid of the old bells and the bell towers, because the original bells were tuned to solfeggio frequencies like 174, 285, 396, 417, 528, 639, 741, 852, 963 hertz. Oh, John Wick. Yo, that is so true though. John Wick tells it all. Man, he got excommunicado over there from the Continental. That was on the Roman Catholic side. Yeah, they put a bounty contract on him. Does this movement? I'm not sure what you mean by this movement. Just because I'm framing this from an aspect of like intent and purpose for to be fruitful. Like, I don't necessarily, this doesn't, like, you know, to be fruitful training group doesn't really fall into a lot of these movements. A lot of these movements are kind of like controlled opposition. Honestly, it's really just for the purposes of, you know, telling people the truth, you know, that like the absolute truth, and getting, you know, the information out there in the context of biblical equity, excluding the New Testament. That's really what this is for. So like as far as like movements and stuff, like if you're referring to like, because there's so many different groups that have different aims and purposes, like it's kind of a broad and general statement, like because you have patriot groups, you have you know, you have estate groups, you have trust law groups. It ultimately comes down to like what, you know, who you're dealing with and that type of thing. I mean, Telegram is run by the feds. I mean, I'm not really, just about all the social media companies are run by the feds. I'm not, you know, they know about everything. That's their job. They literally are supposed to know everything that goes on with the prisoners of war. You know, go read the 1949 Convention on the Treatment of Prisoners of War. It'll tell you. It'll tell you who the CIA and FBI are. Yeah, the bells. That's the reason. Cause you got parasites of varying sizes. Some of them look like people. Some of them got pretty faces. I'm telling you. Some of them got normal people-looking faces. Assemblies are considered domestic here in Oz. Well, yeah, and that's why self-governance is all that. Like, that's why I push so much about just self-governance and self-education and all that, because ultimately, to be able to do anything or enforce anything, you have to be knowledgeable yourself. Like, there's really no shortcut to that aspect. Yeah, but They Live. That's a movie. They Live. Was it the 80s? Yeah, go watch that. That's a good one. Oh yeah. Well, there's an element, depends on how far you are out of their jurisdiction, what you can and can't say, and whether you've taken any NDAs. I'm not taking any NDAs. Not as far as a lot, SSKV and stuff goes. Yeah, I want to do things the right way. Everything's out in the public for a reason. Absolutely. I'm glad it helped you. Yeah, there are a lot of patriot gurus, honestly. That's why, I never really fit into that category, because I learned, the political system was kind of a joke, and the uniparty thing, and it's all being controlled and monopolized by the crown estate. So it's kind of ridiculous at a point to patronize or to set someone up as your father over you under parens patriae, the doctrine of the state as the father. It's kind of absurd to make the state your father, knowing that they literally do not have your best interests at heart, and they're just corporate governors. It doesn't make sense. It's kind of it's at that point where you find out, it's like, okay, if you really continue to do that, you'd really still actually have to question competency, because it's like, why would you consciously do that? So shoot, competency is in the mind. It's what you know. You prove what you create. Proof. You create first-hand testimony. That's how you don't gotta go get it. You have it. Yo, They Live. That's what I'm saying. I've seen them things. I know what they are. Yeah, it's all self-governance. If you know trust law, you know how to operate. You know how to operate if you got trust law. Hippocrates on steroids. Yeah, that Hippocratic oath is an oath for hypocrites. That's what it is. And that's why they lie. Go research whether they're allowed to tell you whether you got parasites on a lab report. Go research it and see what you find. I've detoxed. I've used wormwood, black nut walnut hull, cassia wood bark, and cascara sagrada. I did that for going on 9 months, 8 months with a little break, and almost another month after that. Yeah. Self-determination is how you get it done. Because if there's a will, there's a way. Especially when it comes to things that aren't right, and the desire to correct them. Yeah, man, I'm so glad, honestly. This was nice. This was awesome. Honestly, I'm glad I had, everybody tune in and all your questions. Once this whole video, how long does it take to? Well, here's the thing, right? and this is kind of the gross answer that most people don't want to hear, but everybody, regardless of age, gender, sex, origin, whatever you eat, everybody's got parasites. Everybody. And I mean everyone. I had them probably worse than most people because I grew up eating barbecue all the time, eating a whole bunch of sweets all the time growing up in the South. And, you know, terrible diet. So I had to really detox a whole lot of stuff. And yeah, no, they come out. They come out. I'll just leave it at that. But yeah, you gotta take the wormwood. Like, you gotta take the herbal stuff, because the herbal tea, especially with the wormwood and all that, it raises the alkalinity of your body and forces the parasites out, because the parasites intentionally create their environment and make it more parasitic. So when they make it more parasitic, it causes harm and damage to your body. The reason they don't want to talk about cancer and other things like that is because it's an overgrowth of yeast and parasites. But, you know, yeah. Hey, I'm grateful to be here. I'm grateful to be here. Shoot. Alright, no, thank you. It was good having you. I'll see you on the next one. I'm probably gonna... No, they can't. They really can't stay in an alkaline body. Yeah, they just can't. No, ivermectin, oh, is a double cross. Yeah, I didn't even know that was a chemical structure or in the name or something like that. I don't know. I really don't like a lot of them certain things. Like, I stick to like an alkaline plant, you know, I don't even like the term plant-based, but like, you know, roots, seeds, herbs, stuff like that. Natural things that come from the, you know, I'm not necessarily against certain things like, you know, clean meats, but any meat that sits there longer than 3 days it breeds worms. Yeah, refined sugar. Honestly, refined sugar, it's a huge problem because they grind up pig bones. Like, I spoke to somebody that grew up in New York, and he told me straight up that, like, it was like Domino sugar or something like that. Like crushed up pig bones. It's not just them. It's every single sugar, almost every single cane sugar company out there uses crushed pig bones to bleach their like, they call it bleaching the sugar, but all they do is add the ground up pig bones to make it white. Alright, no worries. Natural earth-given food, yeah. Because honestly, like Adam and Eve, they were allowed to eat the fruits of the garden. I mean, people are frugivores. Now, don't get me wrong, some types of people do better on all meat diets, but that's not every type of people, and those types of people are usually like specific groups of Caucasians. Yeah, I would stop Coca-Cola. I would seriously stop. They call that acid water. Yo, I heard somewhere from somebody that, I think it was online. Yeah, honestly, but they, like at Intel and other plants, because it has like sulfuric acid, they have to call in a hazmat team to go and clean up Coke spills, especially in clean rooms. Like, I'm not gonna drink anything that requires a hazmat team to go and clean up. I know. I don't have a source on that one. That one's just there. But sulfuric acid is a caustic element, and you can essentially clean battery terminals with Coca-Cola. So, you know, it's not great for your body. And it has HEK 293. You know, I don't drink any soda. Yeah, there we go. Your body is essentially a giant battery. That's what it is. Yeah. Because, like, man, it's when you really think about it, like, because the reason why they charge you with certain charges is because they're seeking to siphon off the energy from your body, which the energy from your body is literally you, the consciousness. The energy or the frequency, the soul resonant frequency within the body, the consciousness itself. So, list those herbs. All right. Well, where's my notepad? I don't really want to go through my notepad because it's like I got a whole bunch of stuff I got to clear out. But the herbs are wormwood herb, black walnut hull, Cascara sagrada, quassia woodbark. It's like Quassia woodbark, and black walnut hull, Cascara sagrada, wormwood, and what else? Quassia woodbark. And then I mixed that with clove because clove prevents the creation of new parasites because they breed super fast. That's why it's super difficult to get rid of some of them. And that's why, like, you're really supposed to go on an all fruit diet. Man. Yeah. Shoot, you got two different matrices. You got a universal matrix with all, like, which is creation itself, and then you got a 3D matrix that they put everybody in. That's a lie. I'm not going to talk about it too much, but they got technologies that they had in the 80s that could pretty much open up quantum portals into computer generated spaces. Now, I won't talk about the implications of that. I've seen it. But yeah, they got it. Hey, yo. Yeah, I still ain't using it. No Coca-Cola. I get that, but shoot, if you're gonna drink something, honestly, I just drink orange juice or, watermelon. We're technically supposed to be eating our water through fruit. That's why you got, like, cucurbit family fruits, like cantaloupe and watermelon, but that's also why they're poisoning that stuff too. Yeah. Papaya seeds are amazing. Yeah, papaya seeds, pumpkin seeds are supposed to be good, although you gotta do those in moderation because Dr. Sebi talked about how they're pretty much a hybrid food, but they do kill parasites. So in small quantities, yes, because they literally set up this entire system to drain the ether and the chakras from the body. That is the entire point. When you detox your body to a point, you can see ether and chi. There's a reason why they talk about that so much in Eastern medicine. Oregano is amazing. I put that in almost all of my food. Somatic pleomorphism. Ooh. Yeah, I might have to look into some of those things. Yeah, these parasites, but they are not fun to deal with. Like, the sooner they control people's minds. It's crazy. It sounds wild, but it's true. It causes people to make habitual decisions, which is what leads to sugar addictions and dependencies on substances. That addictive nature is the body being controlled by the parasites, for lack of a better word. So getting, especially detoxing and getting rid of all of those, go on an all fruit diet, do the herbs and wormwood and all that. You're supposed to go on for, I want to say it's like 2 weeks on, 1 week off, in cycles until you get rid of them. So, but yeah, that's how you're supposed to get rid of them. And it's still a bit of a process, because I'm telling you, there's parasites in all the food. And then on top of that, anything touched by fire or cooked, after 3 days, it breeds worms. So you're like, everybody eating leftovers for a week. You're eating essentially spoiled food. Like, I wouldn't keep food past 2 days. So, not cooked food, at least. It's different if you got it in a seed or a grain or something that's not cooked, but I'm telling you, I've heard it so many times. I've seen people put pork chops and like a thing of Coca-Cola, and it was so bad that the parasites in the pork started crawling out of the meat. I was like, "You." It's definitely not good to drink, but it shows you what it does. Oregano, mullein leaf, cayenne pepper. Yeah, that's good. That's good. Put some clove in there though. Put some clove in there and some papaya seeds, and then start doing the wormwood. I'm telling you. Yeah. Just don't overdo it. Because I'm telling you, that stuff is so strong. Yo. Yeah. But alright, y'all. I'm gonna probably hop off here. It's getting a little bit late. I'm glad. Thank y'all for all tuning in. This has been a great conversation. Yeah, I'll have another one for now. Definitely on Thursday, the next Thursday. You know, I'll see as far as like, you know, if I get more than one a week. We'll see how it goes. But yeah, I'll definitely have one next Thursday. So the time frame, I'll either do it the same time or earlier. So yeah, I'll have to see. I'll put the ingredients in there. As far as like the amounts, you got to try to do it, just kind of see how much you can take. Cause especially when you boil a pot of tea. Yeah, it was. It's good talking with y'all. So, but yeah, like I said, let me know in the comments, like when this thing gets posted on YouTube, like anything you want me to cover next week. Or, you know, I might see if I can get a video around to it, see how the week goes. But yeah, I'll catch y'all on the next one. It was great talking with y'all. Y'all have a good night.